time of 6 o'clock, I'd like to call the September 23rd, 2024 Village Board meeting to order. Filling in for President Bolt tonight, so could I start with Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alex Vedvik,
Here.
Kelly Coyle,
Here.
Aaron Mishka,
Here.
Chris Vohl is absent, excused, Chris Iden,
Here.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman.
Here.
And Ken Charneski.
Here.
All right, let's go up to item number 2, public comment. The first name we have on the list is Sandra J. Sorensen.
Can we defer comments till later?
Hey, well,
Yep.
probably good to speak right now.
I'd rather do it at the end, closer to the end. I want to make sure that I'm on the page with what's been happening here. And I only go by what I read in here, so you can recap what's been going on, and I'll know for sure if I'm in line with what I understand.
Yeah, public comments.
Yeah, we have to have it at the beginning, it's just go over rules and order.
Well then,
Please come up to the microphone and state your name and address, please.
so I have to go just by what my understanding is. I guess I'm gonna ask questions and you can tell me if my understanding is correct.
We need your name and address in the microphone if you would, please.
Okay, Sandra Jean Sorensen, 1946 Deerwood Trail, 715-355-7670. Anything else? Okay. So, my understanding first is that we're going in debt to buy 2 ambulances, to hire a paramedic and, I don't know, EMTs, put them on payroll, for them to work 8 to 5, 8 to 4:30. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct? Yes or no?
Well, pretty much, except I don't think we're hiring anybody right now. We're using
Well, you're not
people
gonna
that we already
You're
have.
not gonna buy ambulances
I
and not have them staffed.
Well,
would like to, because I'm on the, trustee Buchowski Hoffman and I are on the ambulance subcommittee for that. It is a proposal, it's a joint implementation and feasibility committee, which I know sounds different, but due to the lead times of a lot of the equipment, that's the way it kind of has to go.
So,
The pro-
excuse me, has anyone authorized the expenditure? In other words, have you brought up a referendum to the voters and asked if we're in favor of this, number one?
Well, the village board approved, moving forward on an ambulance service with the stipulation that there's a joint feasibility and implementation committee overseeing all of that.
Well, we
So it's-
currently have a contract,
It expires next year.
right. My bottom line is, have you taken it to the voters and have I missed that vote?
There's not a referendum on it.
You're spending how much money for 2 ambulances?
Well, that's what we're debating about in the ambulance subcommittee, and I would point you to that. A proposal from the fire department, hold on, let me explain, you wanted a dollar amount. The proposal called for $710,000 of total capital costs.
I just want to stop right at this moment, though, guys, because Sandra, with all respect, we are going to have that conversation coming up.
Okay,
And
that's why I wanted to.
during that time, as long as we're in order, then if you have a question.
Yeah, I do have one more.
But since this is just to be comments.
No, that's okay.
Okay, thank
I
you.
just have one more question, and that is, I have heard that we had, the village owned 40 acres of land that was used for the landfill, and that 35 acres have now been sold. Is that correct?
It's been probably what about
Several years ago, it wasn't 40 acres, it was 30-some.
Okay.
And they kept 7, so, yeah,
it's been-
it was
it's been
sold
sold some time ago then,
about 5 years.
okay. Did we, I'm sorry, I try to vote on everything and keep current, but I don't always get there, so.
Mhm.
Forgive me, can you sell that property with us not voting on it? Is that legal?
It is because we had a citizen complaining about that. In fact, it was discussed in closed session, and the staff member told them, yeah, they could do it. And I came into it after it was about 3/4 done, I got elected. But I can give you
No,
quite a bit, not now, but if you email me, I've got a lot of documentation on that.
okay, that was just my question, okay? Thank you.
I would just encourage you to attend if you're interested about the ambulance, because there's a lot of complexities. But no, it is not only being staffed 40 hours a week. It would be staffed 24/7, 365.
All right, next on the list, I think it's Monty. I'll defer, you defer. All right, thank you. Next is Bernie Kramer.
My name is Bernie Kramer, 2150 State Highway 153, Peplin. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, trustees. I have a concern about the cost of Kronenwetter Drive North, $2 million for less than 2 miles. I think there needs to be some competing or evaluating firms come in there and analyze it and give us some options. I can't, Kronenwetter sure isn't gonna blacktop many roads if we're gonna pay for that amount of money for that short amount of blacktop. And the same thing goes for TID 2. Their whole road proposal and the cost of it is just too excessive. We don't have truck traffic like they're alluding to. I live in 153, that's truck traffic. We had old 51 done down here a few years ago for less than $1 million. And there was a lot of controversy with that, but in the end, it turned out pretty well in terms of cost and quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. All right, who's public comment? Let's go to item number 3, reports from staff and vendors. Community Development Director report.
You have my report. The only thing I would add on there is I did have a meeting with the property owner from a complaint regarding kind of a commercial animal establishment and possibly outdoor commercial entertainment, but they were very cooperative, and we're gonna be working towards 2025 to get the correct permits that they need, and I was just down here and control it. Other than that, I'll take any questions.
Any other questions for B? All right, let's move on to item B, Director of Public Works and Utilities report.
Thank you. Just a couple highlights about my report here. One thing I want to point out is that I'm working on a cost analysis of a new sewer truck. The first person that we sat down and talked with said new sewer truck, give or take about $550,000. So I'm going through the last handful of years of what we've paid contractors to do sewer jetting for us and what it would cost for us to do, and see how long it would take for us to recoup the cost and how long the truck would last. So I'm just speaking with other contractors in the near weeks and everything, and see what is beneficial for the village here. If we are completing our 5-year plan of flushing every single line in the village, or if some things are getting kind of left behind. So I want to get everything caught up so we don't have any sewer backups, lift station maintenance, and all these things. So those are just a few of the things I'm taking into account with the budgetary aspect of this. So I'll have more in-depth report in the coming weeks and months here with the sewer truck and where we stand with that, if we're going to continue with status quo of hiring a company going forward. Let's see here. Also in my report, I just have a few other odds and ends that we're taking care of around the village. One of the things is the ADA entrance in the front of the building here. We have that pole right between the doors, so we're just waiting for the electrical company to come back and kind of push it off to the side where it's still compliant, but just not directly in the way of our snow operations, and it isn't the highest quality pole that's there and the little sensor that's there, so, I'll put it nicely that way, so we're still working with them, and we'll get it done here very shortly.
So when you say electrical company, that's the installer?
Correct.
Right,
Yes.
because there's no wires involved.
No, it's all digital,
Okay,
wireless.
and now this vac truck, you said you checked with one vendor?
So far, yeah, I
Okay.
have, appointments coming up in the next couple weeks with more.
Okay, because, it was only a couple of years ago, we had a price of like 330.
Yeah.
So, I know it's gone up, but,
They've gone up like crazy, it's.
and, are you also including a place where to store it?
Yes, we, reached out to a contractor the last couple weeks here as well, and we're getting quotes about that, so that's gonna factor into it as well. What, it would cost for a building to store it, cause we can't just leave it sit outside, cause that'd be a waste of funding, so the whole dollar amount going into it, I'm gonna factor into what we're gonna do with the sewers going forward.
Okay, so, you're thinking a separate building then, or like a addition onto the water treatment?
It could be either or, depending on
Okay.
how big it's gonna go and what, type of, measurements we can get with it and how big we need to have it for the truck and just a bunch of setbacks and things like that. So either way, it's gonna be somewhere over there.
Okay, and you say your, filtration plant completion in November, when do you expect it to be in service?
Well, we just got a call last week from, Becker Hoppy saying the filter was supposed to be delivered today. And, that is getting delayed, so we're waiting for a schedule. So I reached out late last week for an updated schedule, and we've heard nothing. So, Lisa was part of that meeting, and that was underwhelming for us. So, it's, very frustrating out there how it's just sitting there and nothing's being done.
We are entitled, because we had made that very clear to the
Absolutely.
contractor that we will be pursuing liquidated damages as part of our comment. If they do not meet the new in-service date, we gave them one chance on that.
Correct, and I believe the date is November, I forget the exact date, but we mentioned that many times when we met with them last week, saying this is the drop dead date that needs to happen by.
Don't worry, when they see me now, they know that that's what I'm there for.
So, yeah, I mean, as long as that's hopefully being made clear to them, I mean, we gave them the one oops, but
Absolutely, absolutely.
I have a question just about, I know it's been circulating around, we've had issues here in the parking lot, and I have some serious security concerns at this facility. I mean, there's, to my knowledge, no, camera infrastructure, and my understanding was Clip was discussing that.
Right, right.
And-
We discussed that at the last CLIP meeting, so I'm gathering ballpark quotes on what it would cost for a camera, for key fob entrances, just so we can know who's coming in, who's going out, what time, for certain offices, main doors, and then, like you said, cameras, and look at the, lighting diagrams to see if we have enough lighting around the campus here.
Including the PD, so
Absolutely.
they have evidence room in there, so,
Absolutely. Yep, PD is involved with this as well.
okay.
I have a question about the roof membrane.
Sure.
Are they gonna be working on that soon before it gets cold, and is that under warranty?
It's under warranty, it's
Okay.
not gonna cost us anything, so it will be done before winter. That's what
That's not
they told me.
impacting anything structurally inside right now, or any leaks or anything, it's just not sticking?
As of right now, there's nothing that I saw, maybe during a heavy rain earlier this summer prior to myself coming here, there could have been, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay,
Okay.
and, but if you go up to the tower, it's not sticking, it's wavy, it's kinda squishy on the bottom, and they were supposed to put new, plywood boards down
Oh.
or some sort of reinforcement, and it wasn't
And
good.
they didn't do it,
They didn't do it.
so they're gonna rip it all apart basically? and redo it.
Indeed,
Yeah.
all under warranty.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for the public restriction? If not, let's move on to the treasurer's report.
And just kinda give you guys an idea of what I've got going, earlier today, I was able to wrap up the 23 audit, so the next village board meeting, CLA will be here to do their presentation on the 23 audit. I also emailed that out earlier to the board, just so you guys could see. But I will take any questions that you have. Just been doing a lot of things back and forth with the TID and everything else, so I'll take any questions.
I was told by someone that they had asked for whatever you had for the 2025 budget. Were you able to send that out?
Not yet. I will get that done tomorrow.
Okay. And you're gonna be gone in the next few weeks?
No, that was the last 2 weeks. I had a bunch of trainings. So when that request came in and things like that, I was at trainings and everything, so now it's back to,
So now through the whole budget season, you won't be gone?
no.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? If not, let's move on to old business. Item F, August 26, 2024, village board meeting minutes.
I looked them over. I have some additions, I think should be included. On page 10, after it says, you know, the reason for the closed session, and it says to wit, employment status of village clerk. And then after that, it says, board moved into closed session. In between there, I'd like to add, trustee Charneski questioned attorney Tironi about his email stating that Charneski would be subject to criminal charges if he did not recuse himself from the closed session. Charneski agreed to leave the closed session for the portion dealing with the mandamus lawsuit and election complaint discussion. Charneski stated for the record that he did so under duress and due to Tironi's advisement that he would be arrested for misconduct if he did not recuse himself.
That is
I think that should be
What
an
happened?
agenda item for the next agenda. That's enough.
Yeah, I got a transcript of it, so this is accurate. And Bobby,
He
if you-
strongly advised it to you. He didn't say you'd immediately be arrested if you
No,
sat in on
he-
that, but he advised
his
you as
e-
an
his
adverse
email-
party to the
his email
village,
said
asking
that-
for liquidated damages, that you should not be in on that meeting.
his email
Not
said that
liquidated,
he
sorry,
would be,
punitive damages.
that there would be criminal complaint filed. So that's,
He said that
part of that
anybody
is
could
in his
file,
email.
anybody not, including anyone not in the boardroom, could file a criminal complaint.
well,
For
I've got his
using your
email.
position as an
Okay.
elected official to benefit yourself as an adverse party to the village,
Well,
asking for
I know what he
damages.
said.
That's-
I have the transcript.
I wouldn't call
but
that
this-
being under duress. I mean, that
Well,
was sound
okay.
legal advice that
I'm telling
protected
you
you.
what I said at the time to reflect it into the minutes. And I also said for the record. So that's, when somebody says for the record, or let the record reflect, or something like that, that means they want it reflected in the minutes. Just like Tironi said, to make sure that the minutes included that I decided to leave the closed session. He wanted that included. So I wanted to make sure that my comment was also included. And I have this typed up, so if the clerk can see this. And then farther down where it says, Charneski returned for closed session agenda item discussion at 8:21 PM. And then I would add, and participated in the partial discussion of the Von Briesen report. And then on page 13, where it says items discussed in closed session, it doesn't include Dave Baker's election commission complaint in that list, but that was included in the agenda. that be talked about. So I don't know if anyone else has any changes, but. So, okay, and then one other thing, I wasn't in most of that, but I know Chris Voll had sent me an email saying that the clerk's retaliation complaint would be discussed in that meeting. It wasn't discussed when I was there, but if you guys discussed it, then I guess that should be added. So that would be something for you guys to determine, but, that's what I was told, you know, before the meeting.
I mean, I haven't heard of minutes having that long of a, right, it's supposed to summarize the highlights of it, you know. And Bobby, you had, I mean, if I recall, for League of Municipalities, kind of guidelines for how minutes should be written, my understanding is that they should be, you know, relatively succinct without, I guess you'd call it narrative, as you would describe it. I don't know, I mean,
That's correct. And what Mr. Charneski wants, I believe, is on audio, on the audio section,
Is that?
the wording.
Yeah, it should be, you'll hear it on the
So you can hear
recording.
it on the audio, but it doesn't need to go in the minutes. It's up
Right.
to you guys if you wanna put it in the minutes.
So, and I guess typically I've seen in the past where years ago, 5 years ago or so, trustees have asked for the discussion to be transcribed. They got the transcriptions, I saw in one case, but I don't think it's out of line to ask for this to be added because it's very relevant to what actually happened.
Everything in the minutes looks accurate to me. I'm okay with approving as is.
Second.
I don't know if that was a motion.
Okay.
I don't know that all that needs to be added, to be honest. We have the recording of what took place in open session. I see the summary of what took place in closed session. And if you go to page 12, it does acknowledge that, yes, it was Mr. Baker's WEC complaint, but at the end of the day, really, the only mention of that was that they were being rolled together. So really, it really becomes your elections complaint. So in this summary that's on page 13, I see an accurate summary of what was discussed in the closed session.
Yeah, well, it's, like I say, it's up to you. If, I don't see how Baker's complaint has anything to do with mine, except that it's the same, complaint is against the same person. They're two totally different complaints. But if that's how you discussed it, that's how you discussed it, but it should be listed on 13 as separate. And also the retaliation complaint, if that was discussed, really should be on the list.
I have the WMCA Clerk's Manual here for the minutes. The minutes need not contain a detailed description of everything that transpires at a meeting. Proceedings, when published in newspapers, means the substance of every official action taken by a local governing body at a meeting, regular or special. So that's what it says. The minutes need not contain a detailed description of everything that transpires at a meeting.
They don't need to, but if someone requests certain items, then they should.
I guess, you know, I think trustee Charneski does think it's an important item, so I probably wouldn't hurt just to add his addendum in there, just so that
says when there is a disagreement in what is the appropriate level of detail to be included in the minutes, the clerk, although responsible for taking the minutes, does not have the final say in what will be included. The governing body's decision ultimately will determine what's included in the minutes.
I'm just thinking, any one of us needed some detail or something, I mean, that's why I just wanna, I think it probably,
And it's just kind of surprising that there's, you know, resistance to an accurate change.
Well, I wouldn't call that an accurate change. I mean, that's your position on it, but, I mean.
Well,
we
it
went-
follows the
We went back
recording.
and forth about that for a long time. I mean,
I guess if it's on the recording, it's what's gonna be put in the minutes. And then we can spend our time on more important things.
well, I mean, I don't think that was direct language, is what I'm
Well, if
saying.
it's the direct language, put the direct language in there from the recording.
well, we have a motion on the floor in a second. I guess we should vote on it.
I don't think there was actually a really clear motion made first.
I would agree with that
All right.
statement.
I move to approve the August 26th, 2024 village board meeting minutes
As presented.
as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No,
No,
What's the vote?
So motion failed.
fails on the tie.
Fails because it
3-3.
was 3-3.
Okay. I move we table this item, or I mean, delay action on this item to next meeting pending, I guess, input. I mean,
Well, I think
move we delay
nice.
action to next meeting.
Then we could just look at the transcript to make sure everything matches and got time to do that, so. So I guess, so what's the motion?
I move to delay action to next meeting.
You have a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Alex and a second by Kelly to delay action on these meeting minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Motion carried. So, item G, TID number 2 project plan.
So we're gonna have Brian speak on that, and I'm gonna hand out some of these items to the board.
The source, okay.
You can hold it too if it,
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right, so, what's being handed out is the full project plan, cover to back. And then also, I have a presentation that I'm just gonna walk through that kind of hits the highlights. But if we need to go into the full project plan, we can do that as well. So I'll let, her hand those out real quick. The presentation would be the one that's landscape or sideways, and then the full project plan is the thickest stapled piece that you got. So,
Just to clarify, are these all in the packet besides the presentation?
your updated one is not in the packet, correct?
the
The one you-
updated project plan is not, there was one date change that I'll speak to.
Okay.
Yep, so.
Brian,
Nope, I don't know, I got one. Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna walk through, this presentation, real quick to kind of hit the highlights of the project plan. So we're gonna talk about the current
give him a
position
free piece.
of TID 2, the amendment feasibility, and then kind of the timeline and moving forward. So going to the current position, that starts with kind of its own little title slide, and then the first slide within that that says TID number 2. So currently it's paying off existing debts, and there's continued opportunity for developments within this tax increment district. The village reached out to Ellers asking about, what are some of the options for the district as it relates to upcoming projects that would benefit the district. And we are coming up on its expenditure period, which is November 3rd of this year, 2024.
And then once it's passed, that you can continue to pay existing indebtedness, you can continue to pay existing administrative costs to keep the district running. You cannot incur new costs. So you can either have a signed contract or a financing in hand by that date to have those no longer be qualified as new costs. So in order to execute the projects that the village wanted to include in the district, there would be a need for an amendment. So we've gone through the statutory process of looking at tax increment district number 2's amendment, which is non-territorial, meaning we are not adding or subtracting property. All we are doing is amending the project plan, identifying some new costs within it, which I'll highlight later. So that's kind of where TID 2 was and why this process started. To look at the amendment feasibility, I'll first speak to the project list. And what you see here is the project list that is in full in the current amended project plan. So that's the bigger, staple packet that was just handed to you, and the other one that's in the packet materials, excuse me. But this project list, understand, does have to include under statute all of the projects at each amendment that happened and its original project plan. So what you see here is a list of the projects throughout history, and then by column it's original project plan, amendment number 1, number 2, number 3, and then the current one. And then any non-project costs for this amendment would need to be listed. Those are things that are happening outside of the district but associated with these projects, and we've identified that there's none with those. So the only projects at stake for the current amendment would be the ones in that current amendment column. We're not adding all of these, we're just adding the 4, if you will, listed there. And 2 of them would be updates, right? So project ID number 1, which is basically sewer improvements, and more specifically the lift station. And we'll talk about where these are on the map next, but before we do so, then number 10, there's a general categorical expenditure for, the financing, legal, organizational costs. The majority of those costs would be the interest costs on the proposed debt that would be involved in funding these projects. And then the final 2 are the additional infrastructure projects going in here. Some discussion along the way of could we just throw them in with some of these other costs that were previously identified but not as explicit. We just thought for full transparency's sake it just kind of made sense to make them their own line items here. And then those also would correspond with what's on the map. So in total here, about $7.5 million added under this current amendment in total costs. Then looking on the map here on the next page, basically the financing costs don't have a physical location, so understand that's just kind of won't be on a map. But we have the project A, C, and then B. So if you look at A, that is Kronenwetter Drive project. I believe that's pink, depending on how you see the colors. Then there's B, which is the local roads. That's in kind of the lower part of the map there in green. And then C is the interceptor and lift station, the sewer improvements. Again, that's kind of grouped in the project cost listing with your general sewer improvements, but for this, that project being added is C, kind of located here on the map. So any questions with the projects, because this is the main crux of basically what's being done with this tax increment district number 2 amendment.
Do you happen to have how many miles of road needs to be done here altogether? or not?
RPS had.
I mean, if not, that's okay.
I'd have to look, I think it's on RPS's.
Okay,
Yeah, from the engineer, there's a series of memos that they've provided, the various committees that they've gone to, which discuss that. And off the top of my head, I'm not recalling the exact mileage, I apologize.
I don't remember, I'd have to go back to RDA's.
So then on the next page, we'll kind of speak to the cash flows of the district and kind of the economic feasibility of the district moving forward. So what you're seeing here, left to right, is revenues in the titled orange columns, and then total revenues totaled up in the highlighted orange column. And then you move into expenditures through the titled green columns, and then with total expenditures summed in the kind of highlighted green column. And then under the balances section, that's each row, which represents a fiscal year, annual cash flow, cumulative fund balance, and then kind of principal outstanding. So what we've done is identify kind of only dating back to 2016. The reason being is this chart gets almost unreadable if we go back to its original inception, but just to kind of give some history, we went looking back to 2016 for depiction purposes here, and then you'll see all of your audited numbers through 2022, those are in bolded. Beyond that, 23 and 24, kind of based off of best estimate in terms of where the books are now, and then 25 and beyond would be the projections there. So one thing that I'll identify is the majority source of revenue each year is what's called tax increment. That's derived based off of the incremental value that's been derived in the district. So the value now less its base value when it was created. You take that by the interim tax rate or the TID tax rate to derive the incremental revenues within the district. So we do have the 1/1/24 values, which would represent 2025 kind of tax year, if you will. But the TID tax rate from last year, we don't have that TID tax rate yet because not all the budgets for the involved taxing jurisdictions are set for the 25 budget yet, of course. But we have that frozen tax rate and then a representation of some economic appreciation, and that's why you see the incremental revenues increase. One question that was brought up at RDA is, what if there is no economic appreciation? Does it still cash flow in the same manner? And that answer is yes. The projected closure year would still be 2032 if there was no economic appreciation. Basically everything in the district is frozen, all other things being equal. So tax rate and value frozen. So what you're seeing then beyond 25 is we've eliminated the other revenues for a measure of conservatism. You know, there's some state aids that get thrown into tax increment districts and other miscellaneous revenues that can happen in each year, but we've taken those out for a level of conservatism. You'll see the debt proceeds there. That is the financing proposed as part of a later agenda item here tonight as well. And then that is matching to the capital outlay expenditures for the projects that we just discussed. So there would be general obligation notes taken out to finance these projects and then paid over time. And we've kind of thrown in then at debt service for 2025 and beyond. And right now it's projected that in 2032, with all of these assumptions in tow, that we would have the cumulative fund balance to pay off the remaining last maturity early. So upon revenue collection in 2032 to pay off the 23 maturity and close the district. So again, that cash so if you had no economic appreciation there, that would go down. So there's, again, a pretty reasonable amount of conservatism, but just to identify the economic feasibility and how the numbers look for the district adding these projects. We can afford it within its maximum life, which is revenue year 2034.
So according to these numbers, you're looking at about $6.5 million borrowed and about $1 million interest
Correct.
for 6 years. Okay?
As for your assumed interest rate with it, 'cause you have pre-sale documents, have you been, I mean, as our advisor, I guess, been able to contact some of the competitive, underwriters for this?
Yeah,
To get
so-
an idea of what they think?
Yeah, so we're in the market every day, besides for Fridays. Not a lot of bonds are selling on Fridays, but this is very attractive given the maturity sizes. So we think this will be a highly competitive deal. We've also, provided, and this will be kind of more in the later agenda item, but we're providing a call date of 29, so you could pay it off earlier if things go better as well, but that kind of helps balance some of the competitive nature if you balance the non-callable and callable maturities within it. So we used a similar rating scale of a similar issue and then added, I think it was 25 basis points, but I'll speak to that in more detail when we get to the pre-sale report. But this is, again, I think a little conservative. We have a sale this morning that went really well after the tax rate, or after the rate cut. So I have a feeling that depending on sale day, the volume that's issued that day, are always factors that aren't of the control. Supply is ramping up a little bit, but I think that was in anticipation of the Fed cutting rates. But so far, it's only a day sample size, really hasn't seen that, the more supply has really driven rates up. So we had basically a flat week last week in competitive sales, and we'll see how this week lands. But today was good results for the community that we worked with.
So both of these projects, the the lift station and the road, redoing of the roads, they really create they don't lead to more increment. I mean, we've already have this, these things in place, and it doesn't particularly show us that we will get an increase in tax increment because of them. We're just kind of maintaining or restoring what was there to begin with, right? Like the lift station and the roads.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's an acknowledgement of wanting to stay conservative, that what if kind of nothing happens, and it is closer to the end of its life, so there's certainly the chance that there's absolutely no new improvement, whether that's to an existing building or an empty lot, right? But it certainly could improve the area and carry out the original project plan by adding these costs to it.
Well, it does, lift station, if it needs reconstruction, then that's what it needs.
I mean, there's a couple factors, I'll just state on that, right? There was increment in the district, and in the lift station condition report, I'll just speak about that, just because I've been, I guess, intimately involved with that, with the utility committee. The growth in that area has basically maxed out that lift station, and it's deteriorated in condition. So, I guess it's chicken or the egg. Let's say if someone did wanna build some sort of commercial or industrial or truck stop or something in the TIF there, that would be served by lift station 8, they couldn't, the current condition of the sewer facilities there could not handle new growth of any substantial value as it stands right now. So that was one thing I know we were pushing at the utility committee, not just what we're spending on maintaining the escalating maintenance costs with how heavy it's being run right now with the growth that has already been there, but also, beyond the life of the TID, being able to facilitate even residential growth would be nearly impossible without rebuilding.
Well, that's basically what I said, is that if it needs rebuilding, then that's what it needs, right?
Well, and
I'm not arguing against, you know, rebuilding the lift station or increasing the pipes. That seems to be a done deal. The roads, however, I guess I have to ask you, were you given any instructions by the village or presuppositions concerning like an $8 million expenditure? Because I know that's what you're working with, and was that somehow expressed to you that we wanted to expend up to our limit of $8 million?
When we, yeah, I was gonna say, when we were talking in, RDA and having the conversation, Pete, you can help me with this, but there was conversation on what projects they wanted to do and where they wanted to be with everything, and these were the list of projects that RDA had kind of helped guide, and that is where Ellers came on to start looking at if it was feasible and what we could potentially take and could we pay it back. And that's where it
Because
started.
originally it started out, the idea was to purchase some properties with money from the TID and then also rebuild and create new roads. Can't remember the exact name of the roads. And then from that, they decided, no, we want to just take care of the roads we have. And the list,
Well,
obviously.
I guess the reason I ask is pretty early on, when Leonard had brought this stuff up to the board to get us to approve of the engineers looking into this, they were talking about $8 million right off the bat. And I know there's a lot of comments opposed, not necessarily opposed to it, but questioning it, whether or not we needed all this actual reconstruction of the roads as opposed to a good resurfacing. And there's a lot of difference in the cost. You're talking right now, what, 4-point-some million to redo the Kronenwetter Drive and those side roads. The way they're discussing it, digging it up, putting in new fill, stuff like that. If, that's why I asked the mileage, because typical mill and overlays are, I guess, about $500,000 a mile. Is that right, or is it $250,000 a mile?
About a half.
About a half roughly.
Okay.
If you would look at, RDA, if you'd go back to RDA's meeting on August 8th, RPS has kind of the breakdown of the TID projects and the overlay or not, and exactly how each road would be redone and
Right.
how it would be
Yeah, I saw all that.
Yeah, I think it started out with, to be conservative, all reconstruction, and then since then, after they got some of the borings back, it's, some is reconstruction, some of it, because of drainage issues on those, I don't know what you call those roads that are off of Kronenwetter Drive, not our few other roads, but, the local roads are called. And then, there were some that could just be, mill and overlay, and then there was some stuff that they thought could just be, seal coated again. So it was kind of broken up, and that's why the price has probably come down from the original $8 million just for the roads.
Well, that's good that it's come down, because we didn't have a choice but to bring it down, because we only had so much to spend. And I guess what I'm saying is if if we took a closer look at that and found that a mill and overlay would be satisfactory, that would substantially lower our borrowing, which in turn would speed up the end of TID 2, because they could pay it off that much sooner. And that in turn would return to the village in those final years, money coming to the village rather than going to the TID to pay off a debt for something that we may not need. So that's,
I wanna say that they considered that when they looked at what the final product was gonna be on sections of the road because of the cost. But a lot of it came down to just the way it was built in the first place and the drainage, especially on those local roads. And then coming up, on Kronenwetter Drive, like past, I can't think of the name of the businesses there, that it was getting more truck traffic and the road wasn't holding up. So that's why they wanted to do more.
Yeah, I recall this conversation some months back, that was the whole thinking on these, especially that Kronenwetter Drive part. It was lacking in robustness, to kind of say it that way, when it was originally built. And that is how they ended up on this track of rebuilding it. I remember this conversation, it's 6-8 months ago that I think we first had it. But that's what that was about, was the road was never meant for the heavier traffic it got. And that's what brought on the complete rebuild idea. So if we did that, all we're doing is putting a topping on a bad foundation.
I wanna say some of the roads, when RPS put their package together, they were talking that if they needed different drainage or whatnot, they looked at that. They were looking at all different things of what needed to be done, so you didn't have to come back in the next 3 to 5 years and do the road again.
Right, and that was, I remember that part of the conversation having to do with, what was it, Sedona, all those, the B section in your, that conversation was about they had drainage issues and whatnot. So this is, I know this was brought up before.
so you're saying that if we don't rebuild these roads in 3 or 4 years, we're going to have to resurface them again because they're so bad?
Again, that was just my interpretation.
Okay, well, that's,
Again, you would have to talk to
okay.
RPS to make sure.
Whether
It was
it's-
just kind of the way that they were presenting is, if we didn't take care of the roads, you
What-
would end up having to take care of them in the near
There were
future.
things that I questioned, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but things that just didn't make sense, and they took them into consideration. One is the cul-de-sacs, making them bigger on those local roads, and we don't need to, because we have enough radius there for a fire truck, but for specs, usually they're wider, but to do that, the cost would have been another $500,000 on the 2 cul-de-sacs, $1 million for that. So we did look at it, but at the end of the day, they're the experts, and we're going off of what they're recommending.
well, it just seems to me there almost should have been another evaluation of this or something when we're talking this much money. If, let's just say we did reduce the cost and the TID did close 3 years sooner, for an example, that's almost $1 million to the village.
No, I totally understand.
We also don't have time to
That was
monkey
the other
around
factor.
on it, because the expenditure period ends in a month and a week and a half, so about a month. We got a lot of this stuff. I know we've been scrambling on it, but, I mean, originally looking at it, I know that was the assessment of RPS when we initially had this discussion and some of the others. Just the condition of, especially like the side roads were built not really to standard as you would do if you're, I mean, I'm not gonna go into that, why that may or may not have happened, but, I know we've had, issues with that developer in the past, but, fact is that was part of it. The other thing he mentioned, cause I know you were mentioning borrowing to the max, right, not all of this in the proposal is exclusively in the TID. There's another about 1.5 million for the north part of Kronenwetter Drive.
No, I
know
think
that-
that's in addition.
Yes, in addition to 6.4 million.
Right.
The total issue would be the 7.9-ish million. So the 6.47 million would go to the TID, not hit the normal levy. The other 1.5 million under this proposal would rebuild that road north.
Well, the north end is a whole different discussion, right?
Correct.
Right, but, I mean, some of the discussion though is, right, if you rebuild everything in the TID, then you just end just south of here, and then you have that whole road going north. I mean, it ends, what, probably around G3, right? I mean,
Yep.
right where it ends, so you'd resurface everything brand new, and then you'd have that rest of the road to the north, which I do recall RPS pointing out was by far the worst condition part of Kronenwetter Drive, unfortunately, because of the current drainage along that road. I mean, I've noticed it every year I've lived here, just the north part of Kronenwetter Drive is deteriorating. And I think in the packet there, they do describe, some of the issues going on there.
Well, every road we have is deteriorating, but it's at what point does it need resurfacing? And I understand the stuff within the TID, now's the time to do it. But what I'm saying is, you look at the roads, you don't have to be an engineer, I mean, to know that they're not that bad. It's not you don't have potholes, you don't have, well, basically potholes are your main issue that shows the the basis of the road is weak. Just because you have cracks in the road or even these ruts, that develop in blacktop, that doesn't mean you need to reconstruct the whole base of the road. From what I'm seeing in these reports from Roth, they're talking here and there about drainage issues, and a lot of that has come from the cracks and cracks not being sealed up, and then water gets in there and it deteriorates. But once you have a new mill and overlay where they grind up the surface, repack it, put a new 3 or 4 inches of asphalt, that does seal the road. So a lot of these water-related issues, drainage issues, I guess you can correct me, but they won't be there until 10, 15 years when it's cracked and not properly, what they call that, crack sealed. And that's the purpose of the crack sealing, is to prevent the water, and apparently that got to the point where it's causing a problem, according to the report. So we kind of had a similar discussion on Old 51, where they're talking about more extensive work on that, and I think we ended up just doing the mill and overlay, and I haven't heard any complaints about that. So I guess that's my point here, is just because it's TID money doesn't mean we have to expend all of it, because a good portion of it could come back to the village if we look at this more carefully. I mean, a good portion, if the TID can end 2 to 3 years sooner because we didn't borrow as much now.
I'll also add that the action item of the amendment does not mean you have to spend that dollar amount. So if you're not committing to how you're gonna bid that project, all you're saying is, we can use increment to pay for it. That's
Okay.
the TID action item.
Right.
You're gonna have other action items presumably, unless you sent them out to bid. I don't know. I didn't hear that, but I'm just saying, like, you'll have other action items on the individual project scope and how we're bidding that. The action item on the TID is to allow for increment to pay for it and adding it
Okay.
into the project plan, but since you're doing it, you don't have to spend $6.5 million.
So this is just the authorization to do anything, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
Well, cause yeah, we have a few things, right? We're authorizing getting forward on our, GO bonds
Yeah, and
I mean,
I'll speak to how.
too.
that-
I mean, there's a few things here, but
And there are some things that are on the previous amendments that obviously weren't done. And that can happen here if the numbers aren't right.
So the other, I'll just kind of go to the, just timeline, just to make sure that we're, so the statutory meetings are, RDA public hearing, so it's this plan commission, RDA public hearing, and initial joint review board, those are held on September 11th. Village board, tonight, and then should it move forward, it goes for a final joint review board, so the joint review board, looks at the initial plan, and then any changes that have been made since then, they review it again. That's scheduled for October 8th, so. And then the one element that I'll say in terms of the full project plan, I sent an update, this morning as the dates set September 16th for that, joint review board and RDA meeting, cause that was the original schedule, and then it, changed to the 11th. And it just never flowed through all the Word documents, so that's the only change from what was in the packet, is that on page 1, there's key dates, and it says September 16th 3 times, it'll say September 11th, and I hand it out, or at least it should. So. Take any questions for 10 minutes?
project plan, no.
If not, we want to do this.
I guess, I mean, what you're looking for here for the next step, just to understand, just to basically approve the TID 2 project plan, and then for this item, and then that's all we have to do on this, or do you need anything else from the board?
It would be approval in order for it to go to the, final joint review board, and I believe you have, is that, whatever resolution, you're basically passing on the RDA, resolution, you're adopting the resolution, and then that passes on to the final joint review board, so.
The resolution, okay, a second resolution for the project plan.
Yeah.
You're not talking about H.
No.
Okay.
So the RDA.
Cause I just wanna make sure we're not missing anything, cause we've got 2 village board meetings left, and like one after that, joint review board one, so. And also, you'll have to get the competitive sale out, right, there's a bunch of stuff going on
Mhm.
here in this next month. I mean, is there anything, I guess that's what I'm just wondering, making sure we're not missing anything, like timeline, cause it's so tight of a window.
Nope.
So by saying project plan, that is the, $7 million expenditure, right?
That's what's in.
You're not talking about the plan amendment, we just went through the plan amendment. Okay, so that, do we need to approve that? Okay, so,
RDA approved it, recommends that you guys approve the resolution, approving the same.
okay, to approve the amendment that allows for whatever we're gonna spend it on. I mean, if we don't approve the amendment, we can't spend anything, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that I would think is, you know, a done deal. I mean, but then where does the, actual project plan come in now? This has to come in before they approve any bonds, right? You have to approve what you're gonna spend it on before you
Yeah,
approve the
that's-
dollar amount.
WH.
No, G is approving the project plan amendment, which is this document, which allows for increment to be spent on the 4 projects that we just went through. Then H is what's called a set sale, to allow for the financing mechanism process to start. But that's the next agenda item. G is the approval of the project plan.
Okay, so,
All right.
so is there any interest in any other board members in looking at these base expenditures that's coming, you know, to the $7,855,000? Is anyone else besides me interested in getting another opinion on these roads? Because to me, that's a pretty big question. And really, it's just because we're again at the last minute here and don't have time, you know, this really should have been questioned, much sooner, as far as I'm concerned.
If I'm understanding correctly, all this says is that the TID money can be spent. It doesn't obligate us to spend to the max amount.
Correct.
Okay,
But it can only be spent on the projects in the project plan.
Right.
Like, we can't bring in new projects.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we could make modifications to the road things that would cost less.
Correct.
Right, so we would be approving the project plan amendment as presented. Now, what's actually done could be lesser items or to a lesser degree where less money would be spent. But in order to make any wholesale changes at this point, that ship has sailed. If we say no tonight, then it's essentially dead.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you were to, say no, then technically you have to rehold the public hearing, and then there's the notice period, yeah. So
Yeah.
if you're asking the question of like, is there enough time to get it before the November 3rd?
No.
The answer's no.
No,
Yeah,
this-
yeah.
They already
This
have
is
the
where we're
first. Yeah.
Right.
So the project plan of what this money is going to be spent on, when does that discussion take place? I mean, to me, it seems like if you're approving a resolution for the sale of $7,855,000, you're obligated to have something that you're spending that money on, right? Is that correct? That's what I've seen in the past, is that you don't borrow money unless you have a specific project you're spending it on.
H is greenlighting the process to borrow money, it's not borrowing money.
Do you wanna explain the resolution? He's confused.
Okay, so then that gets
We
back
still
to
as a
my other
board have to
question.
Choose our underwriter, for example, we go to,
Right.
we're sending it to, H would be sending it to a competitive bid for underwriting. Right, and then, since you sent it to a, you know, competitive bid, right, you
Now,
select
don't
your
these
best bid.
underwriters, give their bids based on the amount of the bonds, of the borrowing?
Correct, you would have time to change that before you send out a marketing document to them, which I'll review during H. But that is a week before the, sale, so that is at the end of the week of October 7th is when we'd send out, an official statement to the, underwriting community.
So how do we discuss how much we're actually going to spend if our next meeting is, when is it? It's after the 7th.
Yeah, October 14th.
So I guess what it's looking like to me is for all practical purposes, if you approve this project plan, you're approving the 7.8 million. Is that right?
No, they're two different items. So the first one is, do you accept the amendment and allow them to add those 4 projects, 3 projects to the TID? That's it. That's all you gotta vote on. Do you allow those to be added to the list?
Okay,
Then your next piece is the one that you're worried about, is which projects to do and how much money. So there's 2 different items. You gotta first adopt
okay.
the amendment and then have the conversation of what to spend.
Right. So-
I move to approve the TID 2 project plan as written.
I second.
All right, now we have a motion and second. Bobby wants to explain this in more detail.
So I think I know where Ken's confusion is. Ken, in the packet is resolution numbered 2024-015. That's the one you're looking at, right, Ken? The one in the packet.
Yeah,
That one is incorrectly numbered. That's supposed to be
Right,
2024-016.
right.
So I handed you guys out 2 resolutions. There's 2024-015 that is in front of you. That is the resolution that is supposed to go with item G with the TID 2 project plan. Now, I understand the resolution is not in the packet, but there was a public hearing notice that was published for the RDA meeting, and there was a RDA meeting that was held on September 11th. That subject matter was set forth in that meeting, even, and that resolution was actually in that meeting as well. Even though the resolution was forgotten in this meeting. And that this resolution here in your hand actually reflects the subject matter that was spoken about at that RDA meeting. And RDA did approve of that resolution to be forwarded to the village board. Lee Taroni, our municipal attorney, did take a quick look at the state statutes. He found no special notice requirements for this resolution for this stage in the process. He believes we should approve the resolution 2020-15 labeled approving an amendment to the project plan of tax incremental district number 2 for the village of Kronenwetter, Wisconsin, with item G on the agenda.
Okay, I move to amend my motion to approve resolution 2024-15, a resolution approving an amendment to the project plan of tax increment district number 2 for the village of Kronenwetter, Wisconsin, as written.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Alex and a second by Aaron to approve, resolution 2024-015.
Okay, so just to be clear, where it says, item 4, the project plan for tax increment district number 2, village of Kronenwetter. See Exhibit A. Exhibit A is what you just presented. Just a general, TID plan with no dollar amount associated with it.
You know, when you look through the plan, I can point to kind of the first summary, executive summary. You know, it says total expenditures of approximately $7.5 million. And then if you go later on, section 5, you'll kind of see that these are estimated at the time that this amendment is undertaken. Does not reflect basically a direct budget. They are preliminary estimates subject to change after planning, design, and construction is completed. So you don't have to exactly spend to the penny what's the dollars in the project plan. It's just authorizing the opportunity for increment to be used for those projects.
Yeah, see, to me, if those numbers are in there, it's kind of tying you in. If it was just to approve the concepts, and things like that, I would think then the individual plan of what they're gonna spend it on should be a completely separate document after it's authorized to proceed with that. But now that you got those numbers right in this amendment, it just appears to me to obligate us to something close to those numbers, is what.
Yeah, 15 doesn't have any dollar amount.
Okay, but what he just went through did. This, whatever this is, PowerPoint thing or whatever he just went through.
That's just the projects, though, that's just listing projects and approximate cost.
Ken, I was just looking at the resolution.
Yeah, I looked at the resolution, that looks okay, because there's no dollar amount in there. But then it does say it approves the plan, which does have a dollar amount. So that's where I'm kind of losing track here of what we're actually authorizing.
The point I would make is your 3 amendments prior have projects in an amount of millions of dollars, not all of which have been expended. So the same procedures being followed here, and then it would be a matter of
Well,
where did the costs come in, or how are
I'll
they bid.
take your word for it. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to, and not vote on something that is not exactly clear. So I'll take your word for that item.
All right, we have a motion and second, and the clerk, we have roll call, please.
Alex Vedvik,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
Yes.
Kelly Coyle,
Yes,
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman,
Yes.
and Ken Charneski.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. All right, item H, resolution number 2024-016, resolution for providing the sale of approximately 7,855,000 general obligation notes, series 2024B.
And I'll walk through the pre-sale report, which was also just handed out to you. That is, the document says pre-sale report for and then Village of Kronenwetter. So the one thing I'll note there is, we'll kind of walk through the dollar amounts of the projects when we get to the tables. So we have 7,955,000. Bond council had a number of 7,855,000. These are from updates from the RPS memos that we have. The other element that I'll say is if you read the resolution to the language of approximately, again, and asking the bond attorney, they agreed that you can move forward with this agenda item. And, the amounts, are subject to change as you go to bid. So if you guys say, we don't wanna bid out this project, here tonight, we can adopt this resolution and only do $6 million or, so just note that we're okay. We just updated it so that it would match the total knowledge that we have tonight at this point in time. So under the executive summary on the first page, the purpose of this is financing for roads, lift stations, sewer, forest main, as indicated in table 1, which I'll show later. This will be paid for by village tax levy, so general levy in part, which would include the Kronenwetter Drive non-TID 2 segment. So again, that would be paid from your general property taxes. The TID 2 portion of the borrowing would include the lift station, force main, and Kronenwetter Drive TID 2 segment, and then the local roads portion of this as well. So that debt service would be paid from any revenues derived from tax increment district number 2. The statutory authority is the general obligation notes authority, which is 671212, meaning that the entire obligation is general obligation of the village in which you're pledging the full faith, credit, and taxing powers. That'll then trigger that the notes do count against your general obligation debt capacity, which is, under the state constitution, 5% of the total village equalized valuation. So we do have tables identifying how this looks throughout the life of the notes, but at the exact point that these notes would be closed, should it move forward, the total general obligation debt principal outstanding would be approximately 13.6 million, almost 13.7 million, which is 28% of your limit, with a remaining capacity to that limitation of 34.5 million. So again, I have a projection that I'll walk through in table 4 that shows the full picture. You'll note the point in time of, you know, the 28% that might be different than the first number you see there, because we're just looking at year end, so there's like principal amortized, you know, throughout the year, things like that. So we're looking at it kind of year over year over year, where this is showing on the date of close in the contextual part of the executive summary here. The next section that identifies term and call feature, they're being issued for a term of 9 years. The principal on the notes will be due April 1st, 25 through 33. Interest will be due every 6 months beginning April 1, 25. And we'll walk through the exact amortization schedule in table 3 later on. The notes would be subject to a prepayment of 2030 or any date thereafter. And actually, with some of the changes that we've made throughout the course, I am gonna recommend that it would be 2029 for this, and that would also allow for, should it move forward, be involved in the TID, earlier prepayment if the TID were to, you know, realize additional benefits and have the fiscal sustainability to kind of pay that off even earlier. So I am gonna say that we would recommend, if you do move this forward here tonight, that the call date would be, April 1, I don't know why it says May 1, April 1 of 2029. The bank qualification is basically just saying, since you're not issuing more than $10 million, you just have a wider net of who can bid on it. So these are being issued as bank qualified. The next section, starting on the next page, just identifies that given the current rating of the general obligations of the village, we would recommend getting these rated. So the last rating was AA-, and we would request a new rating for their notes should this move forward. So that's part of what the estimated interest is shown as we pull the sale of similar creditworthiness and maturity size to get a good indication of what the interest rates might be. For the basis of recommendation, we've basically identified here that we are recommending a term and structure that we feel fits the village's needs. That's primarily driven off of discussion with village staff, but we're here tonight to talk about that with the board as well. So if you guys feel there's a different structure or longer term, shorter term, whatever it is, we can have that discussion here tonight with you. The method of sale and placement, we'd be looking to sell these as municipal securities under a competitive bid. We've done similar transactions like this in the past, I think most recently a couple of years ago. And where we're going out to the municipal securities market and asking underwriters to bid on this. On the day of sale then, and what you'll kind of see in the resolution is you would be offering the winning bidder based off of true interest costs, so the lowest cost of financing on the day of sale. So, and then in terms of going to the sale, some other elements that we will be allowing for is kind of a premium and discount bids. That is to say they can bid more or less than the par amount based off of the structure they feel for their long-term investors. The premium pricing is essentially that they would offer higher coupon rates which is essentially a higher interest rate, but pay you upfront for the difference in yield to coupon on the day of sale. This is something that is hard to explain with words, much easier to explain in Excel, and certainly something we can show on the day of sale if it happens. About 90% of the transactions, slightly decreasingly so, are being offered with a premium. I just kind of think that's generally just looking at the low interest rate environment that we're in. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see it. That said, that's baked into the true interest costs, so that would be weighed against anybody who's bidding on a par bid with, 4% interest. If you're getting 4.25% from somebody else, but they pay you down to 3.9%, right? So that's kind of how the premium pricing would work, and you would weigh the bids against each other just on a tick or true interest cost basis. Some other considerations, likely not gonna happen here, but we just like to offer this with a broad net, so that you attract the most bidders, as that usually leads to the lowest cost of financing. But we're offering term bonds, and it does make it more marketable. At the end of the day, all that would require is that it groups bonds together, and there would be a call notice at the time that you would have to pay a term bond. You make your regular scheduled payments, but they group the payments together for the investors. So, but again, just kind of a feature to broaden the market and make it as most marketable as possible. We did review the existing indebtedness of the village, and there's really no refunding opportunities for savings, meaning that the current yields are such that you wouldn't recoup a PV that would outweigh its portion of the cost of issuance if you were to add it in. That said, if there were, other ideas from the board, if you felt the need that there were restructuring that you would like to do or something like that, you're more than welcome to bring them up here tonight, as I know this is kind of our first, face-to-face time, and we can certainly look into that if necessary. And then continuing disclosure, this is just an identification that, issuing municipal security would trigger the continuation of your continuing disclosure requirements. And so we already help you kind of in this endeavor, but just understand this would be ongoing throughout the life of the notes. And then we have a section here on arbitrage monitoring, our kind of services along with the issuance already kind of include the first year of arbitrage monitoring. This can be important if there is, low yield, but, you have opportunities to invest this in legal items that are earning more than you're paying in interest. You wanna be careful of that, so we have arbitrage experts on staff that are included in part of this, so I'd encourage, the board and staff as, the board can direct staff to kind of, make sure those calls, ask for updates on how you guys are looking as it relates to what are we investing these proceeds in. The next section also kind of furthers that discussion, that if you need certain strategies on how to invest it, that, we can help you with that. Again, you wanna make sure it's on a strategy that you have the liquidity for when you're making the expenditure, but at the same time, earning as much yield as possible can benefit to downsize, your project costs expended, your future debt service, et cetera. So, if you want to look at investing in different investment strategies, let us know. Otherwise, a lot of communities use LGIP or their local banks if they offer competitive rates. Just kind of look through various strategies there and make sure you have the liquidity for when it's needed. Some of the risk factors, we just always highlight these no matter what. If you have an abatement source or a geo issue or a revenue issue, but you are structuring this not just on the ability to issue a tax, but you're you know, you have the TID two increment as, part of this. So if in any event, which we just kind of walked through the feasibility of such, so, shouldn't be an issue, but in any event that the TID two revenues were not available, understand you'd be obligated, to find other revenues to pay for that debt service or levy, property taxes to make all debt payments. And then some of the other service providers, there that we just provide is, you know, you typically use Quarles and Brady as bond counsel, using them again, the rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, paying agent is something that if you want, someone to help staff make the debt payments, that you can engage in a third party. Mainly, that's been advantageous, in just kind of an institutional knowledge, element, if you wanna make sure that these debt service, payments are made correctly. The other thing that I'll just say anecdotally is all your payments go to DTC, which is the clearinghouse nationally for all bond payments. And, their email system is interesting at best. So that's who tells you when a payment is needed, but if you'd like to engage in a paying agent, let us know.
And
The
can we even just directly interact with DTC? I didn't think we really could, but anyway, I'm not,
You do, yeah, you can be your own paying agent.
you guys haven't heard of that, but okay. For
So
village website.
regarding arbitrage, it's pretty closely restricted, right?
Yes.
So if we were to agree, you know, to this bond issuance, 7.8 million, and only spent 6 million, we can't take that 1.8 and invest it at what? I mean, what's the rules? You can't invest it
You can't
for
earn
any
above-
higher amount than what you're
Your
paying?
interest payments, and then there's also kind of a time, element there as well. Generally, the attorneys would say you wanna spend that down, within 3 years. You can, fill out the arbitrage certificate in different ways to try to seek 5 years. That's kind of a post-issuance, question though, that bond counsel will be asking staff through the tax exemption questionnaire. But ultimately, right, you wanna, have it spent within a certain amount of time, and then, yes, you would be yield restricted as a tax exempt, borrower.
So it's pretty important that we figure out exactly how much we're gonna spend before we approve this amount.
You would have, right, you would have some time to do so under the idea that you do have 3 years for a spend down, for the borrow, so.
You just simply pay it back.
What's that?
You just simply pay it back, the extra.
No, not until the call date.
Yeah, you could escrow, some of the funds, but you'd be yield restricted on what you borrowed. You know, so you wouldn't have, you know, the certain amount of payments on whatever portion you allocated the escrow to, but right, you'd be, yield restricted on that. I think there's probably a bond attorney question on the limitation of, you know, could you be subject to IRS audit if you're only spending half of it, right? The other element is, these are being issued as geo notes, so they're generally for public improvements. So if, let's say, one of the projects didn't move forward, but a year and a half from now, you had a different project that you wanted to spend it on, you could do so. If they weren't TID two projects though, you know, you're having the levy pay for that, so it's an element of always navigating what's the appropriate allocation between the projects as you navigate that, but, that said, they are geo notes, so geo bonds would be different because you have like 3 resolutions for the individual purposes that you're borrowing. As notes, you do not, so you'd be able to use this for sewer truck or, you know, other things if you decided not to use for the projects listed in today's packet. But that would be true for 3 years, you kinda wanna spend that money. So. I can go to the tables, if you're, interested. or excuse me, I have the schedule laid out there. The most important for the board, would be the meeting to award, the sale. Would be looking at the October 15th
I
or
think it's 14.
14th, isn't that a Sunday?
October
No.
14th is a Monday.
October 14th.
Oh, 14th, okay. Odd that. But yeah, October 14th. And then, closing would be the end of, October, so. That said, we can go into, the tables. On the first, looking at the estimated sources and uses of funds, this is building for what the projects are. So I have the 4 projects listed there. The lift station and force main, which is TID 2, Kronenwetter Drive, TID 2 portion, local roads, phase 1, TID 2, and the final portion, which is all levy, that is the Kronenwetter Drive. Non-TID 2, I believe we're labeling that as Kronenwetter Drive North, from, my experience, here.
Was there any
So-
projects that didn't make the proposal? Did you have extra money to spend, or?
I think there were miscellaneous roads that were still part of that they didn't take out, but
Can you look at the ways that you have extra projects that you could use if we have extra money?
that'd be part of that project.
Generally, it's for public improvements, so that's kind of how Quarles will draft the documents. So I wouldn't use it to purchase land, right, cause there's a private activity concern there, but if it's a public improvement, you could use it, for that. So if you do have questions and money left over, that, don't hesitate to ask us or Quarles and Brady on the legal uses of it, and if it's a question that we don't feel suited to answer, we would go straight to Quarles and Brady. So as the bond attorney, they're writing the legal opinion on if it's, tax exempt and you're doing the appropriate things there, so, that's what I'd kind of recommend as you navigate those.
So I have a question about this chart, this table 1. It's the same chart that's on page 30 of our packet. And it's got the levy portion, 1,485,000. I'm looking at like page 45. It shows engineer's cost estimate for the north branch of Kronenwetter Drive at $2 million.
Yeah, that was the higher estimate that we
Yep.
talked about before, cause he wanted to assume worst case when going forward. He did it, but then he wasn't at, even 50% with it, he was just basing it based on that, and then as he's progressed through, he's gotten more accurate. I mean, he basically assumed you'd have to do a total road base rebuild of Kronenwetter Drive North.
So these, what's in the packet is old information,
It was the original.
or not updated or something.
Well, it was part of the original proposal, and I don't know if it's,
Yeah, so he's just looking at the Kronenwetter North, I'm guessing. He must be looking more at I. Cause I think this one was. Yeah, this was the way back when
This
he,
from July,
Yeah, it's the July estimate, and then I believe you sent in August.
yeah.
Is what we were using.
And what happened is, back to the Kronenwetter North, in July, they were figuring 40% rebuild on that 1.7 mile portion, and now they've got it down to 30%, so that's why you see the change. And they still state that it could come lower than that when they get more information.
Okay, so then basically whatever we had in our packet was not current.
it depends, yeah.
By 1 month.
Well, the numbers came down, so it's even better than what your packet had.
Well, but the packet wasn't very good. That's the problem.
It It also depends on when we get the information and when the packets are due.
For the rest of the sources and uses, then it's estimated issuance expenses, which we know ours, we're estimating on quarrels, the rating fee, the underwriter discount, which is the majority of it, that's the underwriter's takedown. We generally estimate high on that, so that's $12.50 a bond, and that's what that's calculated on. We've seen a few come in at 10 and 11 the last couple of weeks, but 12.50 is generally the high end. Each deal is its own, kind of ins and outs on how the underwriters would bid on that. And then the estimated interest earnings, we did want to plug something in, but we just have a conservative idea of like 3% for 3 months. Your spend down's probably going to be longer. Hopefully you can earn more than 3% because the LGIP at minimum is about 5%. The one warning that I would say with LGIP is that's a moving rate. I would invest in something that's fixed. So just kind of look to that, but you can always use your bank and say, hey, LGIP is this, can we, get this fixed for 6 months or what, however you wanna typically work that. And then the rounding amount is an identification that you issue these in a series of $5,000 blocks, because they're bid on the back end from the investors in those $5,000 blocks. So you use that rounding for first year's, first interest payment, extra project costs, towards project costs, kind of whatever you want to, but that's what the rounding amount is to get to $5,000 blocks. So that's how this is sized. Again, the updates that we have to the numbers of 7955 is from all of the updated information that I have on file from RPS. So that's for each individual project.
I have a question from Bernie back there. Pete, could you hand Bernie a microphone?
Mr. President.
Your mic, please.
Bernie Kramer, 2150 East State Highway, turn on Bernie.
I was wondering what the purpose of putting the levy portion in with the financing plan for TID 2. I mean, I'm just a layperson, I get confused. But, is it necessary to have the levy portion of this, the whole plan here together like it is, or what impact does it have?
No impact to the TID project plan. I thought an understanding that it's being issued, the TID 2 portion is being issued with something else would be a fair representation, because otherwise it could be confusing. I thought, someone could say the GO notes are 7955, but TID in the project plan is only 64, so.
But with this levy portion, we aren't borrowing any money there.
There's a borrow.
But I mean, on the next one down, it says $2 million on that.
The 2 million is an old number, the 1.46 is the new updated number from RPS.
And this is the right number here?
Yes.
So,
Currently of what we have.
so in other words, this whole project went together. I know you questioned at the RDA meeting that you maybe should be some separation, and I wish somebody would really explain it, why it has to be. We aren't borrowing any money on that, are we? Are we borrowing right now with this? Is that all together, one shot?
Yes, that's what's under consideration in this agenda item right now.
And this covers the north portion as well as, oh,
Yep,
okay, thank you.
that's what they're looking at.
I mean, it makes sense if you're doing it all, because you get the one, you only have to go to one issuance.
Discount because you're doing everything together too, is that correct?
Typically, if you do a construction project, more the merrier, you get a better discount, absolutely. Instead of breaking it up.
So then the amortization schedule is on the next page of the pre-sale report. This is table 2. This is the, you're looking at
Which page are you on?
this page 7
7.
of
Okay,
what I-
right,
the pre-sale
okay,
report. Yep.
good.
Do you see table 2?
Allocation
Yeah,
of debt service,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. No, I just wanna make sure you're on the same page as I. The first couple of columns would be the TID 2 amortization, which we kind of talked through during the project plan as a representation of can the district make those payments in those years. The next couple of columns under the levy portion, principal and interest, and then the total payments are identified there. We'll talk about the impact on that on the next table, but then we total those two to look at kind of the total principal and interest paid over time should all the projects be borrowed for and for this amount.
So this page we're looking at is just what we're talking about tonight. I mean, it doesn't include any of our other debt, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, so when you take the, for instance, the TID 2 portion, you got principal, interest, comes to 7,447,000. The village part comes to 1,000,000, practically 1,800,000. So the total of the borrowing is 9,241,000, is that right?
Principal and interest, yep.
If you
So,
don't
so
call
how,
any-
how are the bonds only 7.8 million? Or is that just,
That's the interest payment added to the principal payments, so that's why it's 9.2 million in total payments. 'Cause-
okay, so you're not borrowing the money to pay the interest then?
No, no.
Okay. It'd be a, kind of a good idea, but,
That would add interest costs, right?
okay,
So-
but in reality, that's our true cost. You know, just because we're borrowing 7.8, you guys don't forget, 9.2 is actually what it's gonna
That's
cost
the
us.
total payments,
Well,
yep.
that's the nominal amount, right? I mean,
Well, it's, and I wouldn't
That would
mind
be
if
like
it was
saying your
15
mortgage
million,
on your
if it
house.
was something that really benefited us, that we would get a return on. My point is, if you I believe fully that if you resurface those roads with a mill and overlay and save several $1,000,000, we're gonna be just as well off as if we dig those roads up and rebuild them. That's the way I see it. And then if it's not the cost, it's what we're getting for our money, is basically where I'm coming from.
I thought RPS had most of those as mill and overlay. Can't remember from that.
Well,
I guess
if
it
it
depends
is, then
what
what,
I don't remember him
mean-
reconstructing and rebuilding the roads unless it would have been absolutely necessary,
In
but I wanna
Kronenwetter
say.
Drive North, I know he identified on page 42 of the packet that, you know, some of the issues he was seeing with it and the thin road base that was there, so it's really dependent. I mean, obviously, any of this can be a judgment call, right? Do you wanna continue bandaging stuff? You know, where do you think growth will occur? I mean, we have TID 1. You know, we have that big section, and we're discussing the floodplain ordinance here. To my knowledge, Kowalski Road interchange is basically dead in the water. So is there ever a desire to have any development, you know, coming from Maple, you know, the truck traffic would usually come up from Maple Ridge Road, up Kronenwetter Drive, if you ever developed that big parcel next to Northland Lutheran there, or any other parts of TID 1. You know, I don't know what that would look like necessarily, but, I know he identified very insufficient road base to handle truck traffic. I think he had, if you pull up page 42 in there. I mean, some of the
Well,
issues that are on there, I know this is the non-TID part, you know, I mean, we can go into some of the other areas, but,
well, the northern part that's in the general levy, at this point, I wouldn't support that at all, because the village needs to get a grip on its own finances here first, and I'm not really prepared to lay a new debt service on the taxpayers if first off, if we don't need it, and secondly, I don't really think, that Kowalski interchange is dead in the water. There's quite a bit of potential right now that it may come through yet. So, especially depending on how the elections go.
Which elections?
Well, the state, state assembly and,
Okay, I just
yeah, not local, no. I mean, doesn't matter who's elected here, we can't make that go through, you know.
Did you hear these roads weren't built up very well, right, initially?
Yes.
I mean, the Kronenwetter Drive, I mean, I know we're talking about two different things a little bit, but rebuilding Kronenwetter Drive around G3 and leaving the rest there, I mean, some of the cost impact, right? I mean, once you have all your crews there, if you end there and you need to rebuild the road in the future, probably be a lot more than 1.47 million, or whatever it is in here. Sorry, 1.46 million. Would be my assumption to redispatch and redesign that whole road to the north. And you'd have a brand new road all the way up to G3. And then you have the road that's the worst condition just left there.
Well, you don't have to redesign it because they've already got the engineering done, and if later, if they decide this is accurate and it needs what these current plans say, the next company that we might hire to finish that road would just follow these plans. Or they may come back and say, well, they were a little over engineering this a little bit. You really didn't need this or that. You know, it's just like a medical thing. You wish you could get 2 or 3 opinions to really know where you're at.
Yeah,
And at this point, I don't know if it would really be that much more to do it in two separate projects.
Yeah, to your point there, I guess, it depends on how long you wait. If you wouldn't do Kronenwetter North right now, depends on how long you would wait. If it would be 1 year later you'd do it, you could probably use these same plants, but if you wait 5 to 7, 10 years down the road, then you might have more degradation, more base that starts falling apart if it goes over culverts, you know, erosion.
Well,
You might have to get
it could,
at that
and
point.
especially
So it depends on the
if you
timeline.
have water seeping in through
Right.
the surface.
Right. So I guess just,
But hopefully,
yeah, just how long you wait.
I guess, I would think in a couple of years, we would know if that Kowalski Road thing
Right.
really is dead in the water or not. Because if it's not, that whole north end has to be moved anyway. So we'd be paying for it once and then a year or two later tearing it all up.
So Lisa, as a budget wise, that 1.5 million for Kronenwetter North, is that gonna put us in any jeopardy or debt, or, I mean, obviously it's debt, but you know, how is that affecting our budget?
Well, every time that we take out debt, we get to add that to the levy, and it'll change on how much we get for tax increments, so.
It
And
doesn't affect the deficit, it just raises the taxes.
Well, and, so that's something too, I'd like to go in, cause some of these numbers are lower than what I had anticipated, cause we've been talking about this with the ambulance service. I know I had published, kind of a debt fund analysis. It's one of the many documents there. You know, I had forecasted, cause these interest rates are a bit lower, I mean, there's been some market changes from when I first did it. I think I had like a 4-point-something% assumption in there for our interest rate. $47,000 in 2025, I had forecasted 65,000 or something like that. But, as I'm pulling it up, you know, we have a policy option as a board that's unique, that, I've also kind of brought up at the ambulance committee, that we can do this project, due to our unique, financial situation in the debt fund. As of last budget, we had a surplus of $584,000 in the debt fund. So with that and the earnings we've been getting, what's not on this table, people aren't seeing, is the majority of our debt as a village matures after 2028, which I assume is why, Brian, you mentioned moving the call date to 2029, because then we could potentially retire more of this debt in 2029, because about 6/7 of our debt matures in 2029, well, at the end of 2028. So with our surplus, we could, I mean, based on projections we're doing, at least in the ambulance committee, we could cover this debt with that surplus, because we can use that surplus to cover interest and principal on payments. We could cover all of our debt we would need to rebuild Kronenwetter Drive North and the ambulance service, and still have hundreds of thousands of dollars left over, and keep the mill rate completely flat through 2028. So those two things combined, you could cut the general fund deficit, by my projections, about 40%, based on last year's budget we did. And we could keep everyone's taxes with a 0% increase through 2028, and potentially be in a position to have substantial tax reductions in 2029, depending on what other capital needs we need as a village.
Well, you're still spending that surplus. That's good money sitting there that's earning interest, and
That we can't
If
use
we-
except to retire and to make
Right.
interest and principal
Right.
payments, which we currently have lower interest debt on the books. So it would make more sense, in my opinion, to use that surplus to finance capital needs that we need in the future with the higher rate environment we have now than we did a couple years ago.
well, you're using money that could be used to pay off our current debt and lower the current debt levy.
Well, that's what I'm saying, it's a policy decision, you know, would you rather use the surplus to pay for, real capital investments in our community at an interest rate, 3 to 4%, or would you rather use it to not invest anything in our community, including roads or our, fire, police, potential ambulance service, or other improvements for our village, and basically retire debt at 1% interest? I mean, to me, I think, like I said, this is a policy decision, is the only goal, the lowest property tax ever. I'm all for maintaining low property taxes, but we also have to invest in our infrastructure and our community. And I think we can do that and make real positive capital investments in our community for the future, and hopefully for a growing community. With the levy limits they have in this state, the laws behind that, if you're not growing, you're stagnating, and then you're eventually decaying, you're falling behind inflation. So we're at a critical crossroads here, where we have to make important decisions. And in my opinion, I'd rather invest for the future than continue to do nothing in this village.
Well, it's not doing nothing. I thought I kind of explained myself about 10 minutes ago that it depends what we get for our money. I mean, yeah, you invest in the infrastructure, but you want to get the most bang, for your dollar. And that's the question here is this rebuilding, reconstruction all necessary or not? And especially at the north end, should that take place now? Or wait a couple of years to see how this interchange thing shakes out? And, do it then, because it's not much of an investment if we do it now and then it has to be torn up in 2 years. I mean, that's the real question. That's what I'm asking here is are we spending it on necessary items? And let's just say these roads do not need to be rebuilt, but resurfacing would be fine. Well, then, a few years down the road, once the lower debt is paid off and TID 2 is closed, and we're taking in $250,000, $300,000 a year from that area that used to be TID 2, now you've got that much more to pay for infrastructure that really is benefiting the village, whereas we don't know that this reconstruction of these roads really is that much of a benefit. That's where the question comes in.
Well, I mean, you'd get some back, but due to the TID structure, I believe we can spend about 23 cents on the dollar in the TID. If we can do it before the expenditure period, if you spend nothing in the TID, yeah, in theory, you could close it sooner, but then, you're going to have a more impactful, or you're gonna have more impact on the overall village levy if you'll have less spending power per dollar of village levy, I guess you might say, if we do nothing in the TID.
Well, nobody's saying do nothing. We're saying cut it back to where we get the benefit that we're looking for, at a cost that, shows a, whatever they call it, cost reward ratio or whatever you wanna call that thing. And I guess it just would have been much better if we had another report on this engineering study, from some other engineers or something that either were confirming this or, like I said, just like a second medical opinion, you may get a completely different answer. And we're just going with one company.
With the Kowalski interchange, and the third time they told us that we don't meet the 5 criteria for the next 10 to 20 years. So what changed?
There's more than
Well,
that to it. That's
let me
not,
ask you, when was the last time the Kowalski Road Interchange Committee met?
probably a year ago, maybe more.
It was January 11th, 2023. So that
Okay,
committee's
that's more,
clearly
yeah.
moving at a blistering pace.
Well, some things you don't force. Some things have to wait until the time is right. And there's more to that interchange than just that report. I mean, that's part of it. I'm not, hanging my hat on the interchange, but there is a definite, certain amount of likelihood that it may come through yet.
But how would an election change that? I'm just looking at the report, it says, there's 5 basic needs for an interchange. And this report summarized and says that, these 5 needs are not currently met and will likely not be met within the next 10 to 20 years. So how long is that road gonna last?
Well, that's that guy's opinion there, and that, there were several other opinions based on that report that gave other indications. So, I mean, you can read that thing did, put a wet blanket on it, but it didn't sink the whole project. I'm just trying to get the most for our money here, and I don't wanna waste a couple $1,000,000 on something that's not necessary.
Can we hand Judy a microphone, please? Or Judy, you want to come up, please?
Turn it on. Back when you don't.
back when we organized all of this, and I was on the RDA, and the Kowalski Road was turned down. It was turned down by the federal government and the state government and the county. And we were told at that time, Rothschilds would have to give up the Cedar Creek exit. You know that's not gonna happen. We have an exit on Maple Ridge Road, and you have an exit on 153. You cannot have all these exits and on-ramps. We were told to forget it. And that goes back to probably 2007. So that's why we're wasting our money trying to get Kowalski Road exchanged. It's not gonna happen.
Well, that is old information, and the thing with the exits, that was something that the former administrator always said, stop the whole project. But then later on, we found out that these exits, the spacing between them is not the issue. So there's a lot to that project, which is not, this isn't the time to, really talk about it, but.
Well, I mean, you're using that as your argument.
It
to not
is.
do anything with-
It's part of it. It's
with
part
Kronenwetter
of.
Drive North, which
It
if
is.
we do want, I mean, that's also the decision, right? Like, do we want development in TID one? I'm in support of continued growth and development in this village. Because, I mean, the way that the levy limits are, structured in this state, if you're not growing, you're decaying, you're dying as a community. I mean, cause you can't raise your general levy. Your only option is, to keep up with inflation, is effectively taking on debt at a certain point, and that's not sustainable to do that for your operating costs. So, I mean, we can be creative to kick the can down the road, but, we're seeing what's happening to our general fund deficit as growth has stagnated. I mean, we can't
Well, I
just
mean,
keep bandaging
redoing
infrastructure.
Kronenwetter Drive, especially north, I guess I don't see where that's going to improve, or encourage a bunch of new construction. It's convenient, it's nice to have a new road, but there's quite a few roads that would be nice to be new. But that one, I don't see where you can equate redoing that road with encouraging, new businesses or new construction. Because the road right now is not that bad. It's not like somebody's gonna wanna go, out by M&J or something and put up a business and say, oh, I'm not gonna do that because this road isn't, brand new,
Are you saying North Kronenwetter Drive is not that bad?
Yeah, not compared to Maple Ridge or.
I was gonna say, I just
the other
drove
ones.
that on the way here from work,
Didn't know
and
it
I bounced all the way down that
Well,
thing.
it is, I mean, but so is Maple Ridge, so is a lot of other roads.
This is my opinion. I know I've been on the board 12 years. The amount of roads that we actually have fixed in those 12 years, I can count on my one hand. And that's what kind of bothers me, is that we really haven't fixed anything. Trust me, I hate spending money. I'm like all you guys. Trust me, I get it, Ken. I get it, Alex and the audience. I hate it. It makes me sick. But overall, I think sometimes we have to fix something. Because Kronenwetter Drive, even though, like, as you say, might not be getting, we're not gonna get money from it. Well, we don't really get money from roads and period, but this is where, it's kinda like our downtown in Kronenwetter. You drive to the municipal center, and it is a washboard. I literally was driving it today, and it's like, that's the way I can, really say it. Trust me, I hate spending 1.5 million, but I would hate to, do one half of it and leave the other half there, because I know it'll just cost more money in the future. I mean, so far, everything's been going up, and it's my opinion, I just think that it's probably time to get it fixed. And like you said, there's a lot of other bad roads too in Kronenwetter. I know we just approved a very small section at our last board meeting. slows down the gravel. And we shouldn't, in my opinion, probably shouldn't do that. You know, if we can afford it, I think maybe, that's my opinion, you know, it'd probably be good to move ahead with something, you know.
Well, and there too, will the mill and overlay do the job? You know, that's
honestly,
at
That's
a third of the
very hard,
cost,
yes.
you know?
I mean, I know prior to me getting on the board, if you ask people for capital road projects, we spent nothing. Everything was chip seal, right? Still everything's basically chip seal. I mean, we got a contract rate for Peplin Road, right? But, I mean, since I've been on the board, I don't recall any capital road, I mean, I've not been on that long, right, this is my first term, but, I mean, in the term prior to that, I didn't see any, roads getting rebuilt. Like you said, I mean, like, we've been bandaging everything for years, and we're gonna pay for it eventually.
And I think the thing with Kronenwetter North, the problem is in the spring, we get a lot of flooding over that road. And I think they wanna beef it up in that spot where it gets flooded, cause I think one of these days it's just gonna wash out. And that, I mean, I'm not a road engineer, trust me, I'm electrical, so I know nothing about roads, but, you know, sometimes I have to give this firm some credit that they did do borings and stuff that, you know.
And with coming in, obviously at the very end for myself here, just looking at this without really doing a whole lot of research after, you know, within the past month here, the spots they are looking to reconstruct are floodplain because the base is maybe 6 inches thick where you need the 12-inch crusher, crusher base, I should say. Just because if you get water in there, it's gonna hold up better, and it's not gonna fall apart in a handful of years, and they do have a substantial amount of just mill and overlay for this. That's just my quick understanding of it with coming in very late to the project here, that's just my quick synopsis of that, so.
So they're not really doing the whole road, a lot of it is mill and overlay.
A lot of it is mill and
70%
overlay.
right now is mill and overlay.
Yeah,
70%,
70%?
yeah.
Okay.
as of August 29th.
Yeah, where they wanna do the full reconstruction, they want 4-inch asphalt, 6-inch top below that for fine gravel, and then a 12-inch breaker below that, just to hold up to the flooding. That's there.
Like I said, they were trying to go through and really
Yep.
look what needed to be done where, and only do it as cost efficient as possible.
So that's just my quick synopsis of looking at this.
So what do you wanna do with this?
I move we approve Resolution 2024-16, resolution providing for the sale of approximately $7,855,000 of general obligation promissory notes, Series 2024B.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion by Alex and a second by, Kelly to, approve resolution 2024-16.
Yeah,
Resolution providing the sale of approximately $7,855,000 general obligation note, promissory notes, series 2024. Do we have a roll call, please?
Ken Charneski,
No,
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman,
Yes.
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Kelly Coyle,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
Yes.
and Alex Vedvik.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Item I, reconstruction of Kronenwetter Drive North.
Well, we kinda talked about that one.
Pardon?
I said you kinda talked about
Yes,
that
we
one
did.
while you were kinda going through it, so.
I'm just going down the.
I know.
guess we
I just wanted to let you know that one was kinda,
I guess we're done with that then. All right, let's go to
I mean,
item J.
I guess we don't have to approve that, I'm
I would say
sorry.
you have to make a motion.
Do we have to do a motion? I don't,
I don't know if you do or don't.
I would,
guess I'm asking.
I just
I'm
figured-
asking the board.
I mean, we've approved the resolution, I would assume we'd still wanna, I think we'd wanna do a
I think
motion.
we want a
Okay.
motion.
Okay, let's go on to item I, reconstruction of Kronenwetter Drive North.
Do we-
We discussed it, if there's a motion.
Do we have a cover sheet or anything, or are we just?
Basically, you have the letter from July 31st from Robert Roth. There was another one we got August 29th, and it was not in the packet. The letters are the same except for, page 2 of 3, we have estimated 40% of road segment will need to be rebuilt, and now it's 30%, but he still has the sentence in there that says, this can be lowered with additional emphasis on construction, testing, and inspection to evaluate conditions in real time. So worst case scenario today, it's 70% mill and overlay and 30% rebuild, with the comment that could be lowered further.
All right. Well, then I make a motion to approve, the Kronenwetter Drive North Phase B Road Project, as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Kelly, second by Aaron.
Do we need a dollar amount not to exceed? I
Well,
guess that's what I'm.
I was
confused on.
I was actually gonna reference the resolution. Would that be,
That's fine.
yeah,
I guess that's what I'm wondering,
Up-
what are
up-
we authorizing here exactly? Are we
that
authorizing
was
moving
1
forward
point-
on it, are we authorizing financing
up
for it, or?
to
design
1.46
construction?
million,
Correct.
yeah. Okay,
Just
So-
wanna make sure we're clear on our motion.
okay, so there you go, so, make a motion to approve Kronenwetter Drive North Phase B Road Project, up to an amount of 1.46 million.
Second.
There.
Right, motion by Kelly, second by Aaron to approve reconstruction of Kronenwetter Drive North up to 1.47 million, was that?
I think it was 1.46.
1.46 million.
Yeah.
All right, we have a roll call, please.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman,
Yes.
Ken Charneski,
No.
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Kelly Coyle,
Yes,
Alex Vedvik,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
Yes. All right, motion passes. Item J, ambulance purchase contract recommendation.
Okay, so, I brought forward to the ambulance subcommittee, multiple ambulances and the costs of those. This is what was recommended to bring forward to the board. It was brought forward to the APC last Thursday and approved there as well. The, information that is included has been sent to Chris Full as of last Wednesday to have the attorney look it over if he felt that was necessary. I have not heard anything back from him. The attorney did approve, or recommend the changes to the cancellation termination portion of the agreement, to add the specific dates. So it changed it from just after July 1st to say July 2nd through October 1st, and then October 2nd through December. One of the items that the subcommittee wanted was the addition of the loaner vehicle to be added to this purchase agreement, which is now in here, that if it is not provided to us by no later than December 22nd, they would provide us with a loaner ambulance if we need it at no cost to the village. Again, this purchase agreement is of no cost to the village if we cancel prior to July 2nd, 2025.
Yeah, just some background on that, we went a little bit back and forth, had the attorney review the exit, there were some other changes in there, clearly stating, each of these dates and the costs associated. I know that was important to us. One of the longest lead time, well, this is the longest lead time, item that, the proposed ambulance service would need. So the idea is to get this purchase contract in place, while we do our joint, feasibility and implementation, within that committee. The idea was obviously to keep the village, with no cost or risk if it's deemed, infeasible. This would still give us, more than 9 months to complete that or to exit this deal at no cost. But it locks in, a critical element for making the ambulance service a possibility. So that's what we wanted to do to lock it in. As Chief O'Brien mentioned, we also had added in a loaner agreement for the counter side, right? There's plenty of language in there if, the village were to not uphold their side of the deal, especially after, after July 1st of 2025. We also wanted to make the dealer and hold their feet to the fire that we'd be able to, if it's deemed feasible and fully approved, that we'll be able to have an ambulance service fully in place by our drop dead date. So we got that in writing that they would provide a loaner at no cost if there's any sort of lead time issues. You know, like we've seen with the filtration plant, for example, you know, with a lot of supply chain issues, the last thing we ever wanna do, health and safety of the public is priority number one of the committee. Last thing we'd ever wanna do is be stuck there without any ambulance. So we got that added to the contract.
Didn't we agree a few meetings back that we didn't have this deadline anymore? That the January 1st, 2026 was no longer a deadline, that if we had to, we could, you know, take an extra year contract or whatever.
Well, well, we discussed that, right, and that's part of the purpose of the committee is to work through it, and with the feasibility is the timeline of implementing it. The biggest risk items in terms of lead time are the ambulances themselves and the associated equipment. You know, this locks that in while we do all the other work that's necessary. You know, committee's not done with their work. I mean, I think it would be, in my opinion, it would be foolish not to, at no cost or risk to the village, lock in our ambulance. If we want to go forward, if we want any chance of making a January 1st, 2026 implementation date, we need to accomplish some things like this, especially this.
It just holds the spot in line and it doesn't cost us anything to do it. If we don't have a go or no-go of some sort by the end of, or the deadline in July next year, then we just simply walk away from it and, yeah. Doesn't cost us anything. It's just a placeholder.
Well, it just seems to me that the emphasis should have been on feasibility before purchases. And like I say, you know, you're still talking about that, January 2020, or this January 2026 deadline, but I understood that was kind of off the table, but, whatever.
Yeah, I guess one thing, I guess I'm a little taken back a little bit, is that I know when it came to the feasibility study, I know one of the things I had brought up and made a motion for is to have like an independent also, like with, that one guy that showed up here, they just named
James Small.
James Small, that he would kind of help us also with this. And I think to me that's a really important part, because before I even wanna even tell a manufacturer start making something, I'd like to get a grip on the true cost on this.
Well, we're not, I just wanna clarify, we're not telling the manufacturer to make this. This is already in production.
This is a.
This is just
stock
locking
unit.
it in,
At the
to grab one. It's gonna be built no matter what, and it's gonna be sold to somebody. This is us
Correct.
at least holding our place in line for a while. Now, I know that's something the committee has discussed, you know, on the feasibility part. And due to the, you know, nature of implementing an ambulance service, not doing this would basically assure that starting ambulance service could not start. Like, if we don't have our long lead time items locked in ahead of time, particularly at no cost to the village, like, that's basically like obstructing the ability of even considering doing it in the first place. I mean, you're probably delaying implementing this, well, at least a year. I know that's something we also were discussing on this Thursday is, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces with this whole part. Ambulance service in Marathon County is changing fast. There's a meeting this Thursday between Safer and Riverside, cause they have a committee right now where they're working on their own merger.
Right.
The meeting is this Thursday, which would basically create a monopoly for us
See,
to have to be contracted in.
That kind of bothers me, because, you know, one of the reasons I know why they're doing that is that we're basically gonna walk away from them.
Right.
They're gonna be kind of screwed, put it bluntly, you know, they're losing a big chunk of their business, so they kind of reaching out to try to save themselves from, you know, and to me, I thought personally, we're getting not really a bad deal out of it in the first place. So that's why I was saying we're rushing out to get this done in 26, when maybe 28's the date, or 29.
Well, then, if the committee finds it's infeasible to make that date, for whatever reason, or the board, finds that's not the right date, right, that's a possibility. But the fact is, there's no chance for a January 1st, 2026 date if we don't lock in our long lead time items.
So-
His feasibility study coinciding with the, we met with the order, right?
Well, we basically have to, if we want any chance. I mean, we can't sit for months on a feasibility study and then, oh, now you have a year and a half potential lead time item. Well, now there's no chance of implementing that.
Can we push for that feasibility study to be complete by July 1st?
Well, we haven't even reached out to anybody for a feasibility study yet.
Well, we're
So-
getting everyone on the same
Well,
page.
what
I mean,
steps have you taken so far on the feasibility?
We've taken a lot of steps on that. I mean, at least getting documentation together, getting the understanding for the committee together. I mean, you know, we're looking at all the factors with it. I mean, we've agreed to look at other scenarios. We've even, been given information from the public that we're considering as well. I mean, I know, Mr. Kramer brought in information, regarding Riverside's actual financials. I mean, that's a model we're looking at. My projected revenues that I had put in that initial spreadsheet are really close to those numbers. I mean, I'm just gonna put that frankly with what Riverside is projecting for 2024 for their revenues.
So I was looking at this is no cost to the village. This agreement is just to have it. So by the June 23rd board meeting, if your feasibility isn't done, you can cancel, correct?
Correct.
And then you go and you get a new agreement or see whatever.
I
But I
guess,
mean, it gives you a little bit, but it holds it, but it's no cost to you, it's no obligation to you. I'm just looking at it from a cost financial
You know,
side of things.
am I
And I
missing
get
something?
into that, there's just so much animosity and there's like two sides to every story, that this wasn't a hard one for me because I'm struggling with it because I appreciate the fact that we want an ambulance service and it would do a service to our community, but then I'm struggling with the fact that there's a lot of people who aren't really on board with it. So I kind of feel like we're damned if we do and damned if we don't.
Well, and that's
But-
kind of why I thought if you keep it and it's no cost, by June 23rd, you can say, nope,
But then there's that mindset out there that if the board says, yeah, go ahead, let's do this, then we're all in for it, you know?
then I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm just
Well,
saying.
that's
we're
what
all
I'm
in.
getting at. I mean, is this really a worry of, if we do this, we're sending a message out that, you know, Riverside thinks, okay, they're going forward? No, this is a placeholder. That's all this is. It costs us nothing. It requires us to do nothing. We're just holding a spot in line
But that's
until
the
we decide
perception.
which direction we're going.
The perception is out there that that's what's gonna happen then, that's by a lot of the people out there. That if we say, yes, we're gonna go ahead and say, write us down for this, put us on the waiting list for it, that we're gonna keep going forward. I just wanna do the due diligence for the people that put us here. I wanna do the right thing, but this one's tough, this is really hard, because there's a lot of different sides of both the stories.
In my opinion, I wish there would have been at least some more favorable showing for the ambulance service for the public before this came up. I mean, that's my personal opinion again, I mean, we're showing, because, you know, the trouble is some of the numbers that we went through from other districts, even Rothschild, basically, like they said, it's not a moneymaker. You basically bill out $1 million, you get $250,000 back. Well, that just doesn't make sense.
Well, and in my model, it was $283,000 in 2026 dollars.
So
Utilizing her.
the ambulance, we, at no point did we ever say that we are going to come out ahead, okay? Because you won't. However, when it's our own service, these are things that we can include in on our tax levy. We get something back from it. Our costs currently are going to continue to increase. We will never return anything. We get no money back. Over the course of 5 years, the contract with Riverside at what they showed, the three of us, would increase 25% over what it is today in 5 years. That's a huge jump of money
I
we
didn't
would
see
never
that.
return back. That was their suggested, they showed us the 2%, they showed us the 5%, and then they said the one that they would probably take to their board would be upping to $950 per capita for 2026, and then a 5% increase every year after that. If you add that all up, it's a 25% increase
That
over
was
today.
under different conditions. What was
No,
that?
that removes the 20,000, the $50 per call.
Something about the administrative.
Yes,
fee.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
Yep. But if you lay it out side by side with the 2%, the 5%, and that, at the end of 5 years, it's 25% more than what we pay today. Of money we will not get back. And no chance to recoup that. And also, no oversight from this village whatsoever.
I mean, we've
But we
been
have the service.
discussing that, but we haven't even had that part in the financial models. We're using the 2% numbers, right?
Correct.
In the Riverside numbers, it's basically a continuation of the existing contract and what it does with our EMS budget.
Right.
Total, I mean,
I
believe-
think we're getting off here because we're supposed to be on the ambulance purchase.
well, I get that,
This
but
kind of comes into play with it, though,
It-
because
it is basically part of it, because in my opinion, voting no on this is like basically sending a message, we're not doing the ambulance service. I mean, that is what that would be. I mean, so if that's what you wanna do, if we kill a no-risk contract to hold our place to do it, I mean, that would be,
And
it'd be
I
very
believe it was-
frustrating to me, but, I guess it doesn't matter how frustrated I am.
What's the correct pronunciation on this dealer?
Pomasol?
Pomasol? All right, I make a motion to approve and sign the purchase agreement with Pomasol Fire Equipment Incorporated for the purchase of the Deemer's ambulance model MXP 170 Type 1 ambulance with both the cancellation clause and the guaranteed delivery.
Second. Oh,
All right, I just have one question, Sandy, did you wanna, if you could come up to the mic, please.
I'm really sorry. I didn't attend the other meetings, so I'm gonna apologize first. Have we looked at how many ambulance calls per year? Okay, what is that number?
About 400,
400 for just
just Kronenwetter.
Kronenwetter. And does that expenditure then get charged to whomever? Let's say it's for my husband or for myself. We would pay that call, right?
Correct.
yes, but the rates are different, and this is where
depends on
it's,
your insurance,
it's
too.
very, complicated like everything in healthcare. It seems like.
If
with
you have
Okay,
billing.
but-
Medicare, if you have Medicare, you have Medicaid, it's different payer rates. So we don't really ever get a full reimbursement for Medicare or Medicaid. Medicaid, you get crap. Private insurance pays at a little higher rate, but still.
So what you're saying is you don't break even? Ever?
No, well, and that's the key on it, because this is the confusing part with the financials.
I'm not trying to be hard.
No, I get it. No, it's a very hard topic. That's why I encourage people to follow. Our next meeting's on the 15th, by the way. Listen to some of the recordings, read the packets. There's a lot of information behind it. The Medicare and Medicaid rates, yes, they pay a flat amount. They're due to equalize, next year. Medicaid used to pay way less. Well, they won't starting next year. Private insurance generally bills a lot higher rate, so you also look at the breakdown of the types of calls that you get. The severity of the calls, all that data is out there. But yeah, we've averaged above 400 calls the last 2 years. About 69% of the calls have been Medicare and Medicaid.
And
The
as
rest
a
is-
village, do we end up absorbing the difference You don't go back and say, okay, you use this is, you don't
Well,
try
that's-
and recoup it.
That's the issue, is that, almost, the way I understand it, almost every ambulance service in the state is subsidized by the taxpayer, to some degree.
Right,
Some more than others. And at the rate we're paying of under $9, per capita for ambulance service, it's unheard of being that low almost. It's a really good deal.
Well,
And,
I mean, that's part of what the committee's been looking at, right? We're using our current contract as though it's not gonna get canceled. But Riverside is losing money on their contract with us. At the end of the day, it's a service, right? It's not a money maker to the village, but it has profound impacts on the general fund and the debt fund, and that kinda also relates to some of the discussion we had earlier, is that the state imposes hard levy limits on the general fund, right? We can only raise
Right.
your total levy by the amount of net new growth your village had in the last year. So what's happened as growth has stagnated and expenses have generally gone up in the village is we've developed a general fund deficit. What we pay for our contract with Riverside, we also have a EMS budget above that. Because we also have first responders that respond to calls to get ahead of that, ambulance call or to join in on the ambulance or what have you. I'll let the chief, if you have more questions, explain that piece, but, that's just a pure expense on the general fund, no matter what. So yes, under the proposal, it would show on paper, it would still be losing money. But in the general fund, it would show that it's, reducing the deficit substantially, cause now all the billing revenue comes into the general fund. Even though you're adding some to the debt levy, well, that's where I was debating on if we use that debt fund surplus, to finance some of these capital projects, that we could keep our mill rates flat. I mean, we could keep, the levy completely flat in the village through 2028, depending what comes up in the future. That's the hope of the, ambulance service. I know there's debate whether that would actually happen or not. And that's what we're working through as a committee.
One thing I wanna say, Alan, is I respect all your stuff that you do. Just wanna say that, but the one thing, like what the ambulance, when say it comes up in June, half of us might not be here. And the way history has done itself, this thing could probably slide through and somebody say, well, we forgot to do that, now we got an ambulance. And that's the one thing is that kind of bothers me, so, I wanna know some numbers before I actually, how do I say that this thing could work before I would actually personally want to approve an ambulance? Even to get it on the list, just for that type of fact, that stuff like this does slip through the cracks. Whether it's been done in the past. And somebody's gotta remember that, that's right, we gotta either go or no go on this ambulance service.
I mean, respectfully, I get what you're saying. A lot of stuff does get dropped, but respectfully, I would hope that one of the people that will remain on the board, we have 3 people that are in a different cycle. We have excellent staff, we have an amazing fire department. I mean, we have engaged citizens. I would hope somebody would remember that if I got voted out of
Well,
office.
the committee itself,
Can I make a suggestion? Whoever makes this nomination or vote
Motion.
on it, bring a motion, put in there that you have to have 100% board attendance to take that next step. That way, there's no sliding it under the table, there's no dishonesty. Everybody has to be here, 100%. You write that in your proposal or your motion.
but no, he's saying cause there'll be an election, there's like
Yeah, he's basically
three
saying.
of us
And it
may not be here,
It really doesn't matter. If you're still on the board, you have to attend that meeting. If you're not here, your replacement has to attend that meeting.
But they might not know that.
We,
This-
You know what I'm
this
saying?
has been-
We've had that happen.
Chris, we do have the ambulance subcommittee that is going to continue
That
to
should still
meet.
be active at that point, right?
unless it is decided before that, that it is a squash all completely, that committee will still be present.
Then let me get David quick, because he actually asked first, so David.
Thank you. My name is Dave Baker, 690 Happy Hollow. I can, definitely see the arguments for going ahead with this in the sense that it doesn't cost the village any money at this point. But I can also see the reason that we shouldn't do it. And in my mind, that is, the board took a 7-0 vote to have an independent feasibility study done. And now the ambulance committee is saying they're responsible for that. So if we can't trust the board to follow through on having a feasibility study, how can we trust you to go ahead with this ambulance purchase? Thank you.
One more quick.
Monty Sorensen, 1946 Deerwood Trail in Kronenwetter. My wife mentioned a couple suggestions. The truth of the matter is, I've been in the business long enough as far as dealing with municipalities in my former job. I was 10 years on the personnel committee for Weston. I've lived in this area for a long time, in Kronenwetter. I've dealt with the boards in the past. The biggest issue I see right now, and the reason that got us coming here tonight, is the fact that I've talked to numerous people out there that the stories are going completely bonkers as to what's occurring on the ambulance thing, on a couple other issues, even the floodplain, and I've talked to you on that. The biggest issue I see is the fact that I know everybody here wants to do a great job for this municipality. The problem is I think the communication sucks. Pardon my French. I think we need to do a better job of going out, not just talking to our own people, but for instance, in this situation, even keeping the village of Rothschild advised as to what we're doing may have eased some concerns there. And I just think that it's something we have to keep in mind. I've got at least 20 people that I've talked to that are talking about moving out of Kronenwetter. That's gonna do the tax base. You've got people that are already talking about getting some people together to go get signed petitions to get every one of you off the board. I mean, this is getting to the point where people are getting a little upset, and it's gonna get nothing but worse. So I guess I would ask that to do what we can for us as a municipality, that we just do a better job of communicating. Thank you.
We got Bernie, one more.
I have to thank the committee, Bernie Kramer, 2150 East State Highway 153, Peplin, Mr. Chairman. I've attended all the meetings. They're doing what they think is right, but I'll go back to way back when I said, Kronenwetter does not need an ambulance service. Some people might want it, but there is no need for it. When we can get it for the price we've got at 8.34 per capita, Mosinee Fire District is paying $30 per capita. Safer is paying $60. That includes Weston and Rib Mountain. And Rothschild and Schofield are paying $77 per capita. And we're sneaking in there and worrying about a little inflation. But one point I want to make with all that. And the young lady over there said, we might be sending the wrong signal out. In other words, whether you know it or not, I didn't even think about this, that we got a contract now for ambulance. Well, the word is gonna get out. This ambulance thing isn't dead in the water. I mean, I've got neighbors out there that I'll let them lead the conversation, but it goes but anyhow. But I appreciate her remark that whether you're for it or not, you're sending a message by approving this contract, even though it's got no liability or anything else. And I think that's important that we don't do that. Thank you.
I'll go back to what I said a couple months ago. When Rothschild's board approves a contract for 2026, I'll be very curious to see what that amount is. Because I have a feeling it's not going to even remotely reflect where we are at right now.
And they.
There is no way that board is gonna let them continue to operate at that much of a deficit.
Their staff said that they had not talked with their board about what they had showed us.
So when I hear like the $30 per capita in Mosinee or the 70 or safer, I think those are the numbers that we're gonna be looking at in 2026. It will not reflect at all, because you gotta remember, our current contract was signed in 22? 22, okay. And where has everything gone since then? I'm telling you, mark my words, if we can set this aside, we don't need, we can vote against this, but just remember that I brought this up, that when that contract comes from Rothschild, it's gonna look drastically different than what we pay right now.
And I can agree with you, Kelly. I just think that this deadline, we should just ignore it for now. Because if we have to pay 1 year higher, well, that'll give us more ammunition.
Well, I mean.
Or 1 year or two. I mean, what they.
How much money do we really have in our general fund with the deficits we've been budgeting for? Because it's gonna get ugly if we don't do something drastic for our general fund. And there's not many good tools for us to fix that.
So what you're saying, we gotta borrow money for this?
We would borrow for the capital, right, under the proposal, and that would be the way to do it. Now, the capital borrowing and financing costs associated with that, plus the operational expenses would not be offset by all the revenues. But the operational expenses would be offset by the revenues.
Well, then
what's in
you're
the
still raising taxes on the people to pay for the debt.
Potentially, up.
Well,
well,
realistically.
The proposal, it came to a projected amount of like 2.7%, or about $17 a year on a assessed house, a house assessed at $200,000. But we have a debt fund surplus, which, again, that's a policy decision of the board. I didn't use that, I just looked at how much could you take on, using that surplus and keep taxes at a 0% hike, due to any debt increases. And, like I said, we have a unique situation there. And it's pretty much locked away. You can't easily just return that money to taxpayers. You can only use it for paying principal and interest on debt. So, again, it's a policy decision whether you use that or not. So yes, in theory, it may or may not, increase the levy depending on what we decide to do as a board.
Well, you just kind of voted to go into almost $8 million debt. That half million dollars will easily be used up towards that if we wanted to, which then will lower the levy that you normally would have charged to pay for that debt. So either way, it's taxpayer money, it's there, it has to be used for debt, but it doesn't mean we need to go into more debt in order to use it.
Well, I mean, it won't be this term that we're gonna run out of money in the undesignated fund balance. But someone, whether it's next term or the term after, most likely the term after, is gonna have a very painful decision to make. And all the residents of Kronenwetter are gonna pay for it, whether it's drastically cut services or drastically increase taxes, or both, most likely both, if we don't do something about the general fund.
And
But you're not tying it in.
Cutting services cuts shared revenue, the ones that we get from the state currently, so you have to be very careful with cutting services.
Okay, let's get back to the question at hand.
We have one more he never got a chance to speak, so I gotta give him a chance.
I'm Dan Schout, 1036 Gardner Park Road. It's interesting, all of this conversation is about money. When your loved one needs an ambulance, you don't say how much is it gonna cost, you say how quick is that gonna get here? I think response time is far more important. Now, if we have a wonderful ambulance, but all of our EMTs and such are 10 miles away, basically that ambulance could be 10 miles away.
The staffing would be here at this station,
24/7?
24/7.
So that are you building that cost in?
It is. Because of the location of the station, even after hours, on-call staff would still have to be here.
Okay.
Correct. And a good example, we were 5 minutes from this station, 5 minutes faster to a call yesterday morning. 5 minutes. And we were not running lights and sirens to that call, and the ambulance was. That's a big difference.
All right, Bernie.
This is about the
Now, for the record, we're gonna have 24/7 coverage by the Kronenwetter ambulance at the station. That's what you're saying.
That is correct. That is what is in the proposal.
In other words, we'll be just like Riverside, safer, and we'll have round the clock, 365 days, we'll have 2 people ready to jump in the ambulance.
Correct. They have to live within 4 minutes.
They
of the
will,
station.
they won't be on call, but they'll be scheduled to be there.
They will be scheduled on call, but
Well, no, wait a minute now. Well, you said at the station, when they're at the station, they're ready for duty. They're not on call, and you will have to pay them $20 an hour.
no.
$20 an hour times 17,000 hours is what?
Okay,
There's no way that you can do that legally in any way. You have to at least pay $7.50 an hour minimum wage, but you aren't gonna get anybody down there on call to stay overnight for 12, 16 hours and then go to work the next day. It will never happen. Everybody would be doing it.
Okay.
Catley would be doing it in the whole works.
all right, Bernie, thank you.
All right, let's.
We have a motion on the floor,
We have a lot of.
and
I think we've got a lot of work ahead.
that's a lot of conversation for the subcommittee. That's not what we're talking about here.
We have been discussing quite a bit on, and we will not quit discussing on that.
I'm just gonna say this, guys, I'm still not against this or for it. I wanna see all these numbers
Yeah,
in a sheet.
feasibility study.
I wanna really see some numbers before I personally move forward, seriously.
Yep.
That's all I ask for, and I've asked for that for a long, long time. I mean, I really, you've got a lot of stuff in your head, but I
Well,
wanna
we can
see.
show you all the documentation we have right now, but, right, the board, I mean, quite frankly, delayed even implementing the ambulance committee, right? How can we go out, when we've had not even a month to do all this? I mean, we first, directed the fire department to move forward on implementing the ambulance service in early June 12th, right? Then it got rescinded, then it got re-put on with some changes. We redefined the scope of the ambulance committee, where we kind of made it a joint feasibility and implementation committee with a suggestion to go for a full-on feasibility study that the committee would basically determine, what they felt they needed to do. I don't think we've ruled out a full, if you wanna call it full feasibility study. I think we've taken a lot of public input on this. But we're early on in the process. Like, I can't give you an answer on whether it's deemed fully feasible, given the scope that we've been given. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't get some of the implementation pieces done, why even do the feasibility study? Cause it's dead.
I don't think it's dead, because this 26 date, we always have put a date down. So if they charge us $30 per capita next year, you've just got more power. More ammunition. I mean, I don't think we have to, I don't know why we always have to have a
Well,
deadline.
I also wanna get the dollar per capita thing out of the way, because
Yeah.
that's our contract rate with Riverside, what they bill. We have a separate EMS budget too. When you add them together, that per capita rate is quite a bit higher than $8-9.
And the
The
higher
Riverside
amounts
portion
that-
of our EMS budget is like 40, not even 40%
Well,
of our EMS
I'll
budget.
feel comfortable once I have all the data, but I'll be honest.
Call the question.
Well, you have to make a motion to call the question if you want.
Well,
Well, I
okay,
guess we already
okay,
got a motion on the
I'll
floor.
rescind the motion,
Well,
but
next we have a motion on the floor, there was a motion and second. and we
well,
just
they do have a
Like
motion
Kelly
in
and-
second,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, actually, I think Kelly, you did the motion,
Mhm.
and who did the second?
Miska.
Aaron.
Okay, so Kelly had a motion, and you had a second to actually approve the purchase agreement recommendation.
hold the purchase agreement.
Hold the spot.
To hold the spot line, that's, we're not paying anything, we're just holding the spot. Right.
So, let's do a roll call.
Chris Iden,
No.
Alex Vedvik,
Yes,
Kelly Coyle,
Yes.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Hoffman,
No.
Ken Charneski,
No,
Aaron Mishka.
Yes.
There you go.
okay, well,
All right.
I just don't know what to say at that. That is unbelievable to me. I mean,
It- This
Item
just
K.
passed 2 committees.
item K.
All right.
I moved to, well, cause it didn't die, right?
No, well, I don't know. At this point, we
We don't have
normally
time
move
for
on
any
to
votes,
the
so.
next item.
I don't know what to say there.
All right, well then we're on to item K.
Yep, let's go on to item K, Maryland County recycle agreement.
Sure, what this is apologize, I don't have the exact contract there. It's Marathon County reached out to all the municipalities in Marathon County saying they are going to do education and outreach about recycling as long as we hold up that we will offer recycling to our residents. So pretty much all the municipalities in Marathon County sign up for this. Marathon County does outreach about recycling and the benefits of it
Is that something we do every year?
every year. And when we do sign this, it's something that the administrator or acting village president basically signs.
Does it cost us money?
No,
Oh,
one bit.
well, I move we approve it.
There you go. Yep. And if we do sign it, we get grant funding, we're eligible for grant funding. Easy as that.
I'll second. All right, motion by, Ken, second by Chris.
Coyle's not here.
Coyle's not here right now.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Well, he's gone.
See, we don't need them very until, and we've got a majority.
Yeah.
So, motion by Ken, second by Chris, to approve to approve the Marathon County recycle agreement. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Item L, Village of Kronenwetter, 2024-2025 municipal property insurance company premium renewal.
So this is just increased due to inflation, or?
That's on Bobby.
The increases are based on, what we have here at the village, and we've acquired a few new items, so it increased just that little bit.
And has,
Really not much of a
has
difference.
anyone gone through these itemized things to make sure they're up to date?
I gave it to Brad gave it to Greg, Pete looked it over as well,
Mark Mackey
Okay.
looks it over.
Mark Mackey looked it over.
Well, I'll move we approve this, item to, go with the new insurance at the higher rate.
All right, motion by Ken, second by Aaron, to approve the 2024-2025 municipal property insurance, company premium renewal. Roll call, please.
Alex Vedvik,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
Yes.
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Hoffman,
Yes.
Ken Charneski.
Yes,
That's it.
Great, motion carries. Item M, ordinance number 24-06, Article 7, floodplain overlay zoning district, chapter 520 zoning, review and recreate chapters 520-40 through 520-49 and replace sections 1.0 through 10.0.
All right, this is ordinance language that we've been working on for a while. The actual maps were, became effective January 13, 2023. So since, to adopt those maps, we also had to make some changes to our floodplain ordinance to comply with the DNR's model ordinance. So I gave you a copy of the resolution language and then the language that was in red. Those changes are just, reflect like housekeeping, there's nothing major to them really. And this was, again, it was approved by the planning commission on September 16, 2024. If you guys approve this resolution, then it goes on, to the DNR and then to FEMA for a final approval. Questions?
So did you say there's a resolution with this too? Or just to approve the ordinance?
There should be a resolution. You must have lost it.
I don't see a resolution, but I'll move to approve the ordinance as amended and, it says amendment 24-06. Is that supposed to be resolution? 2406?
Not resolution, this is an ordinance amendment. I
Okay.
apologize. Yeah.
Okay, I move to approve the ordinance amendment 24-06, floodplain ordinance.
I'll second it. Motion by Ken, second by Chris, to approve ordinance 24-06. Roll call, please.
Alex Vedvik,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
Yes.
Kelly Coyle,
Yes.
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman,
Yes.
and Ken Chernus.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Item N, revision of policy FIN-006, disposal of surplus property.
Who's this?
I can do that.
APC, whoever was on APC, I don't know.
Here we go. So, APC passed this. It's just adding in a few things where if we have something that we can't sell on auction, that it's giving us the option to donate it to schools or to charities of whatever sort of the items that we can't sell. And then if anything would cost us to get rid of it, we could also donate that as well. So it's just adding those two redlined items so that if we can't make money on it, that we can donate it.
Do you have examples of
So
things?
some of the things that we had were, when we upgraded our phones, we had them out on auction 2, 3, 4 times, and they're not selling.
Yeah.
But we did have a school that would take them, and they end up actually donating them to other countries and different things like that too. It's,
Seems like it costs more to ship them than they're worth.
it was free to us.
I was gonna say, it's free to us, so we disposed of them. So that's why those two lines were added,
That's why
was
they're
just to kind of give some language to if we got in that position, so.
Okay, and is there any, like, regulations on who you consider who you're gonna donate it to?
We didn't put that, it just says the village administrator can donate the items, so it's kind of their call. And again, when we get a village administrator, we talked about bringing this back
Yes,
and having more detailed, but this is just a little extra guideline while we don't have one.
Okay, and like these phones, you couldn't just throw them in a dumpster?
We could've.
Okay. Well, whatever, I guess if, go ahead, make your motion. Okay,
I move to approve the revision of policy, FIN-006, disposal of surplus property.
second.
All right, motion by Aaron, second by Kelly, to approve the revision of policy FIN-006, disposal of surplus property. The roll call, please.
Alex Vedvik,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
Yes.
Kelly Coyle,
Yes,
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman,
Yes.
and Ken Chernus.
yes.
All right, motion passes. Item 6, the consent agenda. September 9, 2024 meeting board minutes. Any corrections, should we pull out or just approve it?
Well, I'll move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ken, second by Aaron to approve the consent agenda as presented. We don't need to vote for it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Okay, item 7, previous meeting minutes from commissions and committees, September 10th, 2024 ambulance subcommittee meeting minutes.
The only thing I can say is that it was nothing but obstruction today by the board. And I think that sent a very strong signal to volunteers that volunteer their time to serve on committees, and that was, very enlightening. Just gonna leave it at that.
That's-
We thank you guys for the minutes. Okay, item 8, considerations of items for future agenda.
Nope.
All right, let's go on to item 9, adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Ken, second by Aaron to adjourn. Let's have a roll call, please. All right, let's-
No, we don't.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.